Yes, yeah. And the second night and all that, yep. Taking things out of order tonight.
Oh, sure.
Fine with that, too.
It being 6 o'clock, I'll call this meeting of September 23rd, 2024 of the Select Board to order, and want to let everybody know that Chelmsford Telemedia is broadcasting this meeting live and also taping it for later rebroadcast. If you would join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
One nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, I know we have a few public service announcements this evening, so Erin, it's all yours.
The Health Department welcomes you to join us as we walk on the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail with the walking group. It's every second and fourth Tuesday, May through September, from 9 a.m. to 9:30 a.m., and they meet at the 110 ball fields at the intersection of Fletcher and Chelmsford Street. For questions, you can contact the Chelmsford Health Department, 978-250-5241. Next, we have an announcement from the Chelmsford Health Department regarding their depression and anxiety support group. This group is available to individuals 18 years and older. Registration is preferred but not required, and it's every fourth Tuesday of the month from 6:30 p.m. to 8 p.m. at the Chelmsford Center for the Arts Cabaret Room. For more information, you can call 978-250-5241. The Chelmsford Friends of the Library would like to announce their fall book sale. It's being held next weekend, September 27th, 28th, and 29th. Friday the 27th from 9 to 7:30 p.m., Saturday from 9 to 5, and Sunday from 9 to 1. And it's at the Town Hall Gym at 50 Billerica Road. You can enter from behind Town Hall. The Chelmsford Health Department would also like to announce their Fall Festival being held Saturday, September 28th from 11 to 4 on the Chelmsford Town Common. There's free princess performances, a petting zoo, a bounce house, touch a truck, food trucks, vendors, and 30 plus community vendors. Fun for the whole family. September is Suicide Prevention and Awareness Month. And this announcement is regarding Care Solace, which is a free service provided by the town of Chelmsford to help connect you or a loved one to mental health and behavioral health supports, and to include counseling, therapy, support groups, addiction treatment, and more. For more information, you can call 1-888-515-7881 or visit caresolace.com/sites.chelmsford-ma. From the Mass Hire Lowell Career Center, we have an announcement regarding the Chelmsford Age Strong Job Fair. This is being held Wednesday, October 2nd from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. There will be 30 local employers there, and it's at 50 Billerica Road. For more information, you can call 978-244-3303. Next, we have an announcement regarding Indigenous Peoples Day celebration being held October 12th from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. on the Chelmsford Town Common. And it looks like there is a keynote and some opening remarks. There is a dance. There is a prayer. There is some music, a song. And keynote speaker Chief Tom Eagle, Rising Libby, will be making the keynote presentation. For questions on how to get involved or become a donor, you can reach out to Carly Ream or Sophie Thiem. Next, we have an announcement from the Chelmsford DPW. The DPW is seeking contractors for snow plowing for the 2024-2025 winter season. They're offering a $1,500 incentive payment for each vehicle or piece of equipment registered with the town. All completed application packages are due Monday, October 21st. 2024.
And we have two announcements with respect to the strategic planning efforts in Chelmsford. The first is that there is a social pinpoint site, which is basically a public website where you can go online and take a survey. You can also post or engage in open-ended discussion and open-ended comments on that website. So we welcome everyone's input in the community. The second announcement with respect to the strategic plan is about upcoming community forums. On behalf of the committee and the town manager, I'd like to thank everyone who participated in our community kickoff event last week. And to follow up from that, we will be having some community forums that anyone is welcome to attend. The first is October 8th from 9 to 10:30 a.m. at the Center for the Arts. The second is October 9th from 6 to 7:30 p.m. at North Town Hall. And the third is October 10th from 12 to 1:30 p.m. at the Public Library. So we hope you can make one of those events. And next up, we have three announcements with respect to the proposed fire station construction projects. The first is just a summary of what we are proposing and why, and there is a website that you can go to get more information. But essentially, the question that will be coming before town meeting in October and on the November 5th ballot is posing whether the town would like to reconstruct stations 3 and 5, and we'll be talking about that later in the meeting. The second announcement is with respect to the fire stations. We have tours that will be available to the public on Saturday, October 5th from 10 to 2 p.m. at Station 3, which is at 260 Old Westford Road by Roberts Field, and Station 5 at 295 Acton Road. So if you'd like to see firsthand the stations and their current state today and why, get a little bit more background on why the reconstruction projects are proposed, please join us in one of the tours. The second announcement, or the third announcement, is for, Paul, could you scroll? Is for Thursday, October 10th at 7 o'clock. We'll be having a public informational session. It's open to any town meeting reps or any members of the public, and that session will be held at 7 o'clock at Station 3 on Old Westford Road near Roberts Field. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, now we're at the part of our agenda where we welcome public input. Is there anybody here that would like to address the board on any topic this evening? Okay, and remember you have 3 minutes.
Hi, Doreen Deschler, Precinct 9. I just have a couple questions. I noticed that there's a lot of work going on at the Radisson, and I looked in and I found that our governor has leased the Radisson, and I was just wondering what the plans are for the Radisson. I believe that the citizens of Chelmsford should have a right to know what's going on there. That's my only question.
Okay, we typically do not answer questions during the public input because it's not on our agenda to discuss it.
Okay.
But we can have the town manager give a report at some future meeting about
Okay.
that.
All right, thank you.
Anyone else?
I don't know if this is time for me or,
No, you'll be under the warrant
Okay.
articles.
Anyone else? Is there anyone on Zoom?
No, not for that purpose. no.
Okay, thank you. All right. Committee vacancies.
The following boards and committees have vacancies as of September 23rd, 2024. The Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, the CCA Town Hall Advisory Committee, the Center Village Master Plan Implementation Committee, the Clean Energy and Sustainability Committee, the Commission on Disabilities, the Community Action Program Committee, the Conservation Commission, Cultural Council, the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, the Historic District Commission, the Holiday Decorating Committee, the Parade Committee, the Personnel Board, the Public Records Advisory Committee, and the Recycling Committee. People who are interested in joining a board or committee can find more information on the town website or by contacting the town manager's office.
Okay, thank you. All right, we have a public hearing this evening for the layout of Parkhurst Road. So Paul, if you want to...
Dean Clancy.
Oh, Christine, okay. Christine Clancy, DPW. director is going to explain what we're doing here.
Sure. Good evening. So this public hearing is proposed to accept Parkhurst Road as a public way. We have 187 miles of roadways in the town, of which could be public, private, or unaccepted. As many of you probably know, we've started, this past year, we did reconstruction of Parkhurst Road, and when we were looking at it, we realized that it was never accepted as a public way. It is an unaccepted way. And really what that means, what we have is really this process was going through hiring WSP, a licensed surveyor, to go through and really reconcile the plans that we had on file to put together to propose it as a public way. There were previous plans. There's a 1956 state layout, a 1940 state layout, a 1932 Westford Road County baseline layout. And with that, we also took all the property bounds abutting Parkhurst Road all the way from North Road to Drum Hill, really to create those northings and eastings. It because of that reconciliation of all those plans, it really is a variable roadway width between 48 and 50 feet, 40 and 50 feet wide, 55 feet wide. So this is a proposal with the plans prepared by WSP and also a written legal description. This is proposed tonight as a public hearing for acceptance, and then continuing, we would be proposing this at fall town meeting. Just a couple, as far as the proposal there, it's just about the whole stretch between North Road and Drum Hill is about 0.75 miles, of which we're proposing to accept everything except the piece underneath the Route 3. So it's about 0.65 miles. And this is based on recommendations pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 41, Section 811. And I would say this is more administrative. I mean, it is an unaccepted way, so it's always been recognized as a public. It's owned by the town, but it was never accepted as a public way. So this is more of an administrative formality. Also, the benefit of this is we will be able to receive Chapter 90 reimbursement by accepting this, and that goes into the calculation annually. We are nearly completing the sidewalk reconstruction on Parkhurst, and also mill and overlay between Drum Hill and North Road. Drum Hill and Route 3 overpass. That's all just being funded under capital. So moving forward, if we were to do work on Parkhurst Road, it could be done under Chapter 90. I don't know if there's any questions.
So I have a question. I know we have to send this to the planning board. Do they have to have their hearing before town meeting or not?
Yes, so it's proposed to go on for this Wednesday night.
Oh, okay, it is. Okay. And then after that, it'll go to town meeting, and then it comes back to us to actually accept it?
I believe it has to go back to you on October 7th after planning board accepts it, and then you would accept it hopefully October 7th, and then it has to be filed with the clerk's office 7 days before town meeting.
Okay. So everything has to be done before town meeting then,
Yes.
basically? Okay, thank you. Anybody else have questions about this?
No questions, but I will acknowledge that WSP, I had them survey my properties up on Drum Hill a couple of years ago. They were recently back there this year, and I was like, what are you guys doing? So it's been a mess up there for a while, but it appears as though they've fixed it, and we've got some really good data now to pin this all
Sure.
down. So I saw them on my property, because they went all the way back to the highway
Okay.
with their survey to bring it all back and make sure it
Exactly.
all played out, and it did. So they did a great job, and I have all the confidence in the world that we have it right now.
Great. Yeah, it was what they said is quite of a project to really take all these layouts and reconcile it.
Yep.
Paul, did we notify everyone on that street or legal abutters about this public hearing?
There's no takings involved. So there's no requirement for notification. Again, there's no impact on abutters other than the town is going to literally accept the road that it's been utilizing for over half a century. So no, there was no
So
requirement.
we
There's no legal.
could easily just keep the public hearing open till the 7th until we vote. in case there's
Well,
any
you
other
have to,
feedback coming?
you have to send it to the planning board.
Oh, so we have to close the public hearing to send it to
To
the planning board?
and then you'd come back and do a layout order
Okay.
on October
Thank
7th,
you.
and then town meeting. So if there are concerns, it could all be tabled
Yeah.
till spring. But again, there's no, and DPW is not proposing any work even beyond the right-of-way in terms of what's going out there. So, again, no taking, and for those who don't understand where the right-of-way ends and where the property is, there's no change yet either.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, this being a public hearing, is there anybody in this room that has any comments or questions about this, taking this, accepting of Parkhurst Road? Is there anybody on Zoom, Paul?
No, there's no one from Zoom for this purpose.
Okay. I'll take a motion to,
And we're not making a vote on this tonight. We're making a vote after it comes back.
we're making a motion to send it to the planning board, but
We
we
are.
have to close the public hearing first. Yeah, that's the motion.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve the,
You can just
You have
read
to read
that.
I think it's written,
oh.
Sorry.
Intention.
I move that. Just read it.
I do have.
I move that the select board vote its intention to lay out of Parkhurst Road as a public way, the parcel of land shown as Parkhurst Road on a plan entitled Street Acceptance Plan, Parkhurst Road, Chelmsford, Massachusetts, dated September 11th, 2024, prepared by WPA USA, Inc., and to forward the proposed layout as shown on the plan to the planning board for its comments and recommendations pursuant to General Laws C 41-811.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. All right, thanks.
Thank you.
All right, next up, we have a one-day beer and wine license. No, one-day beer and wine license for Chelmsford Dental Group. Is there anybody here from Chelmsford Dental Group?
Hi, good evening. My name is Vic Kapoor. I'm here on Zoom call.
Okay, do you want to tell us a little bit about your event?
Yeah, thank you for taking the time today. Yeah, so we are having, we started about 2 years ago, so we're having a ribbon cutting ceremony with the town as well as a top Boston Dentist Award ceremony. So we're just inviting our patients to come in for 2 to 3 hours to just celebrate with us. We'll serve some hors d'oeuvres, have some beer and wine, and just show them the office.
Okay, does anybody have any questions about this one-day license? Okay, apparently not, so we'll take a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the one-day beer and wine license for Chelmsford Dental Group at 275 Billerica Road, number 2A, for October 28th, 2024, as presented.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Is that a yes?
I'm sorry, aye, yes.
Okay, thank you. That's unanimous. All right,
Okay,
next-
thank you, everyone, and have a good day.
Thank you. All right, next up, we have a bunch of the library trustees here. So if one of you wants to come up and, to the microphone and tell us about your reactivation of the associate board members.
Looks like I was volunteered, David Braslow, longtime board member for the Board of Library Trustees. Just to clarify, right, our request this evening is simply to have the Select Board review our proposed change to the bylaws for the Board of Trustees to confirm that the change that we're proposing is consistent with the policy that the Select Board has regarding associate boards. And the specific language that we've proposed, which is up on the screen, is actually for an advisory board, which is a non-voting board secondary to the Board of Library Trustees, rather than an associate board. So the specific language that's in the request was put together by a working group of the Board of Library Trustees, It's been reviewed by town council. Town council had some minor recommendations to the language to make it consistent with the rest of the bylaws, and also confirmed that in town council's opinion, that the proposed advisory board was consistent with the select board policy.
Okay, so you're changing it to an advisory board from,
So we disbanded the associate board in response to the select board's policy, and we're proposing a change to the bylaws to create an advisory board that specifically consistent with the recommendation is a non-voting position.
okay, Virginia, Duff.
How many associates did you have before this change?
So it was a flexible number. If I remember, it was a range of 3 to 6 and several of those former associate board members ultimately became elected.
Did they
members of
participate in
the-
the discussions in this advisory capacity as well?
Yes.
So
And
so
the
this-
associate and the former prior to the select board's policy, yes.
So the up to 4 is consistent with how you had been operating?
Yes.
Thank you, that's all I had.
So, just as full disclosure, they had asked me to come to one of their meetings about a year ago, is that when it was, maybe? To talk about their, what was then called their associate board members. And one thing I cautioned them about was allowing these not elected members to participate in discussions, but not allowing other members of the public necessarily to participate in the discussion. And that's where I saw the issue, quite frankly. You may be aware, in fact, since you're chair, I'm sure you're aware that tomorrow night, representatives from KP Law are going to be here in town to have the committee orientation program over at the library. And I was kind of hoping that we could wait until after we, maybe have a little bit further discussion with them, because that's where I see the conflict, is that if I go to or if some member of the public goes to your trustee meeting and sits in the back, the associate members or the alternate associate board members that you had before, and the way I saw it, they used to sit at the table with the elected members, and you couldn't tell the difference, quite frankly. And I don't know that that's the way it's intended to be. That's just my comment on it. So I don't know if anybody else has a comment on that, or if you'd be okay, like I said, with waiting until after we discuss it with town council. Maybe we could bring it up as a discussion topic during that orientation session tomorrow, because there very likely are other boards and committees that may want to set up something similar but are reluctant to do so for that reason that I just said. I mean, right now, the select board, in this meeting, somebody couldn't just get up and come before us and give their comments about what we're talking about right now, unless I identified them and we knew that they had some association with the library trustees.
Yeah, I believe that the policy that we've laid out addresses that concern in terms of identifying the members clearly as advisory board members and identifying clearly that they are non-voting.
Okay, but they still are there. They may participate in all discussions.
Mhm.
That's where I see, like I said, something that.
Was the concern that Pat's raising specifically discussed with town council when you reviewed this, or was it more of a review against the policy and the spirit of the policy and what you could put in place?
I don't know that I know the answer to that. Do you, Leslie? Leslie, the library director.
Hi, everybody. So I don't have the letter in front of me, but Paul kindly
we have.
passed along
We
our
have.
questions. Oh, you have it? It's right there. And one of the things that we did point out, in our sort of that communications was that was a concern that had been raised, having to do with public speaking at meetings and people being able to very clearly see that people who are advisory board members who have been appointed to that role are participating in that role only and are non-voting members. These would have terms of 1 year. And the invitation does go out, has in the past with associate board. In the past, invitations would go out through the library communications widely, inviting people to apply to the library board to be considered for serving in this role. So it is an open process to vote
I
for folks
misspoke.
in
We
town.
have the attorney's letter. We don't have yours. But could I just ask a follow-up question then to what you just said? Why do you need or want an advisory board?
Do you want to speak to that, or?
Sure, I can at
What's
least-
different about the library than any other board or committee?
Right. So there were several goals that had been identified in terms of why we wanted to have an advisory board. The first was to broaden the diversity of opinions and input that we have on matters concerning the library. The library board is a relatively small group of people. Many of us have been on the board for a long time. So that helps us with the diversity. Second is that we wanted to provide a mechanism for people who were not yet willing to commit to a 3-year publicly elected position on a board. As you saw, in the number of open positions, it's very difficult to get people to fill even appointed positions, let alone elected positions in this town. And we thought that by giving people essentially a trial opportunity to participate, to see the board activities, that we could create a pool of potential future board members. And it's actually worked out very well. We've had 2 so far, either 2 or 3 members who started as associate board members who have ultimately run for and been elected to library trustee positions. So we think it's really been very effective. At the same time, we're very cognizant of some of the concerns that were raised in the select board policy, hence the work that we put in to try to come up with a solution that satisfies both.
We have another trustee that apparently wants to give his 2 cents worth.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having us. Kevin Hamilton. I'm a member of the Board of Library Trustees and was first introduced to the work of the board through an associate board position. And if I could just speak to, I think, what makes the library particularly unique is it really is the only kind of free institution that's open to all members of the public. And in addition, the purpose, I think, and the mission of our library is to educate and engage community members. As somebody who was particularly interested in civic engagement, but didn't feel qualified to, run for a more, established kind of role, the associate board really allowed me to dip my toes into what civic engagement is like as a young person. And so that kind of gave me a lot of experience. I think the mission of the library is to educate, and so part of what is so special about the associate board is it gives that kind of opportunity, and it provides a more whole opportunity for and encouraging future political engagement. So I would just say I think it speaks to the mission of the library, but I also think the library itself is pretty unique. It's not quite like a school district. It's not quite like the planning board. It's an open, institution for all members of the public. So I just wanted to add that too.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask, does the board meet separately and distinctly? The associate board or would the advisory board meet separate and distinctly from the trustees, or is this just support for the trustees?
Support for the trustees. We do form working groups for specific issues that come before the board, and anticipate that that working group would likely consist of members of both the elected board and the advisory board.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Any thoughts about how we go forward with this?
Can you say again what clarification you're looking for from council tomorrow?
About allowing advisory board members to participate in all discussions where somebody on the general public may not be able to. Just like we have public input here, but we don't let them, let anybody from the public just come up and talk about anything that's on our agenda.
That's what they're appointed
Yeah.
for, though, right?
Say that again?
That's what the committee is for, is to.
You guys need to fix the position of your microphones. Nobody,
Sorry?
you and Pat need to fix the position of your microphones, please.
Microphone.
Thank you.
I think that's the purpose of their meeting, is to work together.
Right, and when I go to one of their meetings, unless it's going to be handled differently than meetings that I've been to, you can't tell who's an elected member and who's an associate/advisory member. So anybody can basically contribute at any point, anything they want.
So, yeah,
They would know,
It's okay.
right? I mean, each.
They would know, but somebody sitting in the audience wouldn't know.
well, so I think it's a little, it's interesting. The gentleman who just spoke, I forgot his name. He made a good point. It's a little bit of a different setup. Like the planning board, everyone is elected. Even the associate members are elected,
Exactly.
right? So they can
Right.
speak in an open meeting environment and provide input. The zoning board, everyone is appointed, right? But the associate members can also speak at
Right.
will because they're appointed. But in this case, you have an elected board, and they would like to add some associate members,
Not
but they,
associate,
without them
not- be
having
careful of
to
the
run
language.
Right, they're going to call them
for the
advisors.
office. So they would kind of like to be set up like the ZBA, but they don't want their associate members to have to run for the office because they just want to have some extra input in there and some extra people. So yeah, it's a little different. But I understand what you're saying. If the associate members on the ZBA or the planning board can participate in the meeting because they are either appointed or elected to that board.
Exactly.
But in this case, they would not be. So if they're speaking with the board in the meeting, it's an open meeting conflict.
Well,
yeah.
it might
And-
not necessarily be an open meeting conflict, but it puts other members of the public in a different category.
Yeah, yeah.
When you were on the,
Sort of a
bo-
conflict.
when you were on the Board of, just clarify that, when you were on the Board of Appeals as an associate member, and you weren't voting on the case, right? Because you had more alternates than you had members and people voting on the
Yeah.
case. You could participate in the discussion.
Yes, I could still participate in the
But
discussion, even if I wasn't
even
voting
vote-
necessarily on it, yes.
And I think that's what they're almost trying to
Yes.
equate to in this case.
Yeah.
Is similar to that.
Yes, but because they're not an appointed board, you can't just appoint associate members for them, right? So.
But
they
that's
have
what they're
to- yeah.
doing. They're
Yeah.
they're asking that.
Yes, yeah, but they're an elected board, so their associate members would have
Right,
to
and-
actually
and-
run,
Want
and
to
they
be
don't
careful
want
of
to
the
do that.
language. They're not associate members. It's in the
Just
handout. That has
advisory.
a very strict meaning
Advisory.
under Massachusetts state law, which is why they want to have an advisory board.
Yeah, yes.
And so,
I mean, and
so I guess, Pat, the question is, should there be something in the bylaw that talks about how the advisory board is going to be used it talks about how it's going to be used, but in terms of it only meets when the library trustees meet, they're identified separately somehow in the meeting, or if council says it's okay,
well, that's why I
right,
would like
if there
to
is no
wait.
conflict with the public input pieces that you're saying, then to Pat's question about would they be meeting on their own, maybe there needs to be something explicitly stated that they're not, because that's almost an extension of a public body, right?
Well, and that could be an issue,
Yeah.
So,
especially if they're appointed by their, self-appointed, I guess you could say, by because the ZBA doesn't appoint their
Yeah,
alternate
no, the
members.
town manager appoints their alternate members, so yeah, and as an elected board, they can't appoint associate members, yeah, so it's a
so
little
I guess
tricky.
what I'm left with, Pat, is if you want to take a little time to talk to council, it could be tomorrow, but there may be a deeper discussion that has to go on offline, depending what that initial
Yeah, I mean, that's fine.
feedback
right.
is.
Right. So, go ahead.
I assume there's a chair of the trustees,
You're
right,
looking at
David?
us.
Yeah,
Deb
okay,
Oh, okay,
so
that's right.
does the chair run the meeting in a manner that, much like we would, where public comment is kept to a certain portion of the meeting, and so it's not a free-for-all discussion-wise along the way, that the chair points to who's got the floor and who's available to talk to a certain degree? It's a controlled meeting, I assume?
It is a controlled meeting in that we have a formal agenda and follow generally Robert's rules. But I think, as Pat has observed, right, it's a small group of people. There are rarely, I can't remember the last time there were any members of the public present. Yeah, Pat might be the only one who ever attends the meeting who's not a board member or a formal or former associate board member. So I think, to Pat's point, right, there's more open dialogue during our discussions than there might be in, for example, a select board.
And I guess, that's my concern. Granted, yeah, when I was on library trustees, and every meeting I've been to since, there's generally not somebody from the public there. But at some point, that might happen. And then what do? You don't want to put the town in a situation where we are subject to, some kind of lawsuit because somebody who wasn't designated an advisory member wanted to say something, and you wouldn't let them, but you would let somebody else who's not an elected member have their say at any time during the meeting. That really is my concern, that somebody's going to come in at some point, probably somebody's listening right now that's going to come to your next meeting. You watch.
We'd love to have people come to the meeting.
And we're trying to navigate carefully because
Right.
the select board, I don't believe, has authority over the bylaws of the Board of Library Trustees, right? So we're coming to you asking if our proposed language is consistent with the intent of your policy. So that's really the feedback that we're looking for. Is what we're proposing consistent with the intent of your policy?
Okay, and I guess it would also say, our policy was based on the results of a court lawsuit where somebody tried to shut down somebody who was using language they shouldn't have been using during a public comment portion of a meeting. And we had to, we went in and revised all our policies to take that into account, to allow what we could allow, and to restrict things that we can restrict. And one thing we can't restrict is what people say. We can restrict when they say it. But you have to be consistent.
I would also add that the select board policies also address public input as well as
Right.
open meeting law. So it is all part of the same policy document.
Just as clarification, we did accept the Board of Library Trustees did accept the town's public comment policy, which is very useful for giving that guidance, and have since added the public comment agenda item, working very similarly, I believe, to your board, that people are welcome to, speak up to 3 minutes, and that the board in general does not engage during that time, but either will speak to those comments if it is on the agenda later, or it may be on a future agenda. So similarly this way. It does, the goal of the advisory board piece in the bylaws, and, make it as clear as we can, but, is that it delineates that that there are people who are appointed. Those appointments are in the minutes. They're recorded in that way. And certainly the board, I think, has been trying to really tighten up the way those meetings happen. Who's present, announcing at the beginning that the meetings are being recorded, all of the different sort of best practices that have been heard that the select board has been making. So the intention truly would be to make this clear for the public, anyone attending remotely, that these folks have applied for and been chosen as advisory board members, and that process happens annually, and that we would love to have people approach and participate in this way, in an advisory, more robust way than is able to happen in a brief public comment.
Okay, well, again, if you, I hope you're willing to wait. I forgot it is Deb that's the chair. Sorry, Deb. Since you sent David up to the microphone.
He was part of the working group that wrote the policy.
So perhaps we can have a little side conversation with town council tomorrow, if you can be there.
I'm going to be out of town.
Or if David or somebody can be there from the Board of Library Trustees. Meg? Okay. So, and try to get more clarification and, go forward from there. Okay? All right.
Is it okay with you? I'm not a trustee.
Sounds good.
Okay, thanks. All right. All right, next up is the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee has submitted a proclamation request for Indigenous Peoples' Day. And our policy is to review this proclamation at one meeting, and then at the following meeting, we can ask for any edits or clarification on the proclamation, and then potentially at our next meeting to sign it and present it to the committee. Everybody have a chance to review this proposed proclamation? Any comments?
I have one. So I support having a proclamation for Indigenous Peoples' Day. I would be more comfortable with the board signing this if we were to delete the third whereas that starts with a growing number of cities reimagining Columbus Day as an opportunity to celebrate Indigenous heritage and resiliency. And my reason for that is that at a federal level and at the state of Massachusetts level, Columbus Day is still the recognized holiday. I think if there's many communities that will recognize them side by side, and I think if the intent is that we replace Columbus Day at some point in this town, that is going to take a little bit more due diligence and effort with the public. So if we were to just delete that third whereas, it doesn't give the, I just read that as an intention to replace Columbus Day when we said we're going to reinvent it. And there's a lot of Italian Americans in town who celebrate the Italian American heritage of it all. So I just would like to keep it a little bit balanced that way and delete that third whereas.
Okay, I mean, I didn't read it that way, but I can see how you could. Anybody else have any other comments or feedback on Virginia's suggestion?
I agree with Virginia's comment, to be
Okay.
honest with you.
Okay.
I wouldn't want anything to ever get in the way of Columbus Day.
Right.
I didn't read it that way either. I just saw it as recognizing Columbus Day as an opportunity to also, pay homage
Oh,
to.
okay. I see that.
So Erin, I guess maybe you have.
No, I kind of agree, but I also
With
feel like
whom?
I also kind of agree with Virginia, I'm sorry. But I also kind of feel like it's a little, I actually read it as, because a growing number of other cities and towns are doing it, we're going to do it, which I actually think kind of takes away from the spirit of it altogether. So, I think the third where is altogether, I don't have any problem with removing. for
I just think it's cleaner if we don't mention both holidays in the same proclamation.
that too. Yes, I
Okay.
agree with
I
that
think it
also.
could be rewritten and straighten it right out. That one, without taking it out, maybe it's just, a number of cities and towns have recognized the second Monday as
Both.
Just take,
As People
take out
Day
the
and-
last, everything after Indigenous Peoples' Day, just take out the reimagining Columbus Day. Would that satisfy what you mean, Virginia?
Yeah, and Pat, what were you saying? Just rewrite it to say recognizing both, or?
Well, yeah, because I don't see it as a negative. I think the way it's written, a growing number of cities and towns, so we're going to follow the leader. I don't
Take
buy
that
into
off.
that.
Yeah.
Because I do
Right.
think that it's a good opportunity, and it makes you mindful to look at, celebrating, something else that's important to many people in our area. So
I'd be fine with either taking it out or just rewriting it so that it's acknowledging that they both can coexist. Where you were using the opportunity to recognize,
that part I like is
You
that
know.
where, you use the opportunity of Columbus Day to recognize.
to
Yeah,
also
but you said
recognize.
you didn't like having both holidays.
I don't, but if you guys
Yeah.
are,
Well, I
want
mean,
it.
but I like, what were the words that you just used?
I don't like a growing number of cities, and,
Yes.
I don't think anybody here are followers. So I think it could simply just say, we would like to use the second Monday of October, noted as Columbus Day, to also take an opportunity to celebrate Indigenous Peoples' Day, or something to that
and I
effect.
think that would be fine too, because it doesn't sound as all or nothing to me. That was my only concern.
But the
And
fourth
I
one-
actually, I like that approach because it acknowledges letting them coexist, if
Yeah.
that was the intent.
Yep.
Okay. All right, I'll check back with the members of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee and make sure they're
I
okay
think
with
it just
that.
needs to be
But I
slightly
don't,
rewritten.
yeah, I
Yeah.
can't see that they would object to that, so, and have it ready for our next meeting. Okay. Anybody else have any comments on anything else on it? All right, very good, thank you. Okay, reports and presentations. We have Christine Clancy to talk about Americans with Disabilities grievance procedure.
Good evening. So, as part of the Open Space and Recreation Committee, we're going through that process to update that plan, I believe, every 7 years. And one of the requirements when we were meeting is that we have on file a procedure or a written policy on how people can bring complaints related to ADA or ADA access or any other complaints related to, so here it says, basis of disability in the provision of services, activities, programs, or benefits by the town of Chelmsford. And, I guess we informally have a process where I know we have the Commission of Disabilities, and then we have Jose Negron, our building commissioner, where things are brought to him. He does an inspection, he follows up, but we don't have anything written right now as a policy. So this would be proposed as a policy to fulfill that requirement on the Open Space and Committee report, but really just also have one for the town. This process, or this procedure was taken at looking at some other nearby towns. It seems like there's a standard template that towns have implemented, and so this was looking at neighboring or nearby towns and taking that similar language and applying it to Chelmsford. So the process is really just writing the process that we really already have in place. So if there is a complaint that has to be written, and then it's actually given to the building commissioner. He has 15 days to respond. At 15 days, if that cannot be, if it says here, if that response is not satisfactory, then that goes on to the town manager or their designee, and then at 15 days, that would hopefully have a resolution at that point. All written complaints received by the building commissioner or their designee, appeals to the town manager or their designee, and responses from these two offices will be retained by the town clerk for at least 3 years. It's pretty straightforward. So I guess the request would be to vote on accepting this as a written policy for the town.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions about this proposed procedure?
Yes, has this been reviewed by council?
No.
No?
I mean, I don't know if we've had counsel. I know Christina was working on it. This is, there was a recommended template provided, and this is essentially very similar to that template that is on file for multiple other communities.
So it was recommended by council or just
No,
other
it was just
other
looking,
communities?
it was on some of the information available through the state information, and also looking at what other communities have provided. There's a recommended template that other communities have adopted. So I think it's a pretty standard, it's almost like a standard template that's been provided across communities.
And did you mention, did our own Commission on Disabilities get a chance to see this?
So
Do
the
they have
building
any input?
commissioner has
Oh, he
reviewed
is.
this.
Yeah, he's on the he's on the board.
I had the same question as Pat about whether council had reviewed it. The building commissioner reviewing it, is that that doesn't mean the Commission on Disabilities reviewed it?
It was provided to, not necessarily the board, but it was presented as a draft at the last open space committee meeting, and they were there, but it wasn't formally presented to them. It was.
Who was there?
There were members of the Disability Commission, but they weren't given this, they were not given this form. It has been reviewed by the building commissioner, though.
Who is on the
Who is-
Commission of for
No,
Disabilities?
no,
He's
Oh,
not.
he's
He's not.
coordinator.
He's the
He
ADA
is
coordinator.
the ADA coordinator, so
Oh,
he's
okay.
the one. But, so
So
the-
isn't he also a member of the? I thought he was
No,
also.
he
a
is
he's not a
Attends their
member,
meetings.
he does attend those
Oh, he just
meetings, and he
attends,
coordinates
okay.
with them. So I guess the Commission on Disabilities has been made aware of this notice, but has not been requested to review this.
The only reason I bring it up, and I think it's very important to establish a mechanism like this for anybody in town that may have a need, but I also recognize, and I don't think it's changed over the years, and Paul, correct me if I'm wrong, but ADA is under the Justice Department
Right.
technically,
Like
the Federal Justice
government.
Department. So that's the only reason I ask. We're doing this as a local initiative to provide a mechanism for anybody aggrieved by some kind of ADA violation, but I think in this case it would be just a good idea if we could get a quick review from council, just to make sure that it's in line with the overall ADA Act as presented by the Justice Department.
Well, the board's policy is to table a policy till its next meeting anyway. We can have council review it and provide that
Right.
report at your next meeting.
I just think it would be prudent.
Is there a downside to getting input formally from the Commission on Disabilities?
I just hope they would, no, I would hope they would provide that input.
Yeah, I mean, we have to present this to them. We have to make sure that they're aware,
But this is
aware of it.
this is for, yeah,
No.
No,
No, they
no.
they weren't planning to do that.
Well, yeah, but we can do that.
right.
Well, I have my second question is, why is this select board policy? Like, why are we even voting on it, or why?
Because
we didn't vote on the sewer policy or any of the other operational
Well,
policies.
the reason you don't vote on sewer policies is because under the town charter, the DPW
Well,
director has the
okay,
policy of
fine,
the
but
sewer
why-
commission.
why-
The reason that this is because we're required under this derives from the open space recreation plan, which is a state sanctioned plan, and the state requires that we have a grievance procedure for disabilities under that policy. The board that sets policy for the town as a whole is the select board. If there's a grievance or an issue that arises with disability in the town, it's remedied by the disability coordinator, who is the building commissioner. And then the appeals go to the manager and ultimately through the select board and then the town council. The Disabilities Commission is an advisory committee to the town, and that's the distinction. They don't have the authority to adopt such a policy.
I wasn't suggesting that they should be adopting it. I think we were just asking if they had weighed into it. That's my question. But so you're touching on another question that I have, Paul, because you're using both a building commissioner and ADA coordinator terminology, and I understand that today that's one person, but when we talk about this policy should we be identifying both of those roles somewhere in this? So what happens if someday they're two different people? What's the role of the ADA coordinator in this policy? Because right now, it's silent on that.
I believe by definition, the building commissioner is the disabilities coordinator.
No, that's how it's implemented today, but
no.
it wasn't that way before.
Sure it was.
I don't think so.
Since even when Len Olenchek and others were as the town, the authority rested with the building commissioner, and whether it was going back to Scott.
But all I'm
Hammond.
saying is the name ADA coordinator in that boards and committees list was not always the building commissioner. That was a change when the last ADA coordinator left that position.
Okay, I can check that.
So,
with council as well.
if there are two roles that we're talking about in this policy, then we ought to be clear on what those two roles are in case they're not the same person someday. That was a choice that the town made, right? It's not.
I'll confirm that with council.
Okay.
I don't believe that was the case.
So it
Okay.
sounds like it might be nice to get input from the Commission on Disabilities and possibly from Town Council.
Correct.
And then we can,
Yeah, and then our next meeting, yeah, we can go further with it. Now, so where would this be published? Would it be under DPW policies so that,
No, I believe in a town clerk.
Yeah, it would
Oh,
be,
okay.
I think it would also go under the select board's policies, because, again, I believe the select board is the one adopting the policy on behalf of the town.
all right, well, how would somebody know that it's there?
Because I think you'd have to codify it and place it in your policy book,
In the select board policy book?
yes.
Um,
'Cause you're-
Can we check with council
Sure.
on that too?
Mhm.
It just doesn't.
Yeah, because like, where do we have like harassment policies? Those
Right,
are under
right, that's
personnel.
not
Yeah.
a select
But this-
board thing.
Yeah, that's a bad example.
Right,
but-
it's a bad example.
Um,
It's-
But other complaints that people, might bring forward, or grievances, I guess is what this is about. Yeah, I guess where it's located, I don't
But
I don't know.
who else can adopt it?
Is it
Well,
an
no,
HR
just because we
policy?
adopt it doesn't mean it has to be necessarily just
then-
in our policies.
But if it isn't in your policies, how do we track the policies that the select board have adopted?
I just want a place that the general public can find it easily.
Right, and that's why I thought the reason we codified and have elaborated on the select board's policies is that there was an organized central repository of policies of the select board for the town, and I'm not aware of, off the top of my head, of any policies the select board have adopted that aren't in the select board's policies and procedures manual.
They're all there.
That's what I'm saying, they're all there.
I think it's as simple as putting it under the select board policies and then under ADA, complaint form or
But
whatever
I
it
still,
is,
I
so
still
that it's
wonder, why
flagged.
isn't it an HR policy or
You know,
something?
I mean, if
Well,
somebody.
because it's not HR. It's not
Because it's
just
not
the
HR,
employee.
that's the issue. This has to do
Right.
with the idea of issues of people who are aggrieved on the use, and this comes out of the open space plan. So that's what's the genesis of this and why it's coming up at this point in time. And the reason that Christine is bringing it is she's assisting that effort of the update to the open space and recreation plan. So that's where it's coming out of. But if we adopt it in that plan, it's not going to be known to anybody. That's the problem. Because it'll be in an esoteric plan and not a general
Right.
policy of the town.
Right, I don't think it should be in that plan, I agree with that, but, I don't know, does anybody else have an example of where somebody might have a grievance against the town, and where would they go to look for a form? I don't know, is it something, if people, I don't know, I can't think of an example
Right, and the
now.
ones that are HR-related are under the
Right,
personnel rules
right,
and
and
bylaws.
this isn't HR.
This isn't HR.
Correct. It's a general residential type
Right.
policy, or even visitors, or, all right, well, I guess we can,
Give it to the town council to just review.
yeah,
That's all.
we'll chat with them.
But where would you go, where would you file a complaint on any other matter?
What happens if an
Like,
employee has?
if somebody wanted to file a complaint and say the plow driver yelled at them when they drove by or something like,
That's
where would you go to
person-
file that
that's
complaint,
HR.
other than?
That's HR, that's personnel.
Oh, okay, all
What if an
right, I
employee
see.
has an ADA complaint?
So-
Is that HR?
If that's HR as well, because
So
if
this
it's,
is for non-employees?
if an employee has a complaint, it's an HR complaint. If an employee had a complaint that wasn't HR, but that was about an employee was on open space land, not
Has to be
related to
geared
their
towards the
employment,
general public,
was related to the
understood.
general public, but not related to their employment, then I think they would complain to.
Does this say open space in here? You keep talking about open
Oh,
space.
so,
Elaine.
so what triggered what was the open space plan requires that a policy like this be in place, but
Okay,
there's no
this-
reference.
But this policy as written is not limited to open space.
Correct.
That's where I
And
think
that's
we're
the-
getting confused, Paul.
Well, the open space plan, so for other communities and looking, it just requires that you have a procedure to file a complaint on anything ADA related.
It could relate to the sidewalk outside. I mean,
Yeah.
this policy is bigger than open space.
It's probably a policy,
Yes.
a policy that should have been in
Yes.
effect before.
And that's why that plan has to reference a grievance policy under
Right.
space, which is why, again, I thought it would belong under the select board because it's a general policy and not buried in, well, we adopted this for the open space plan.
Yeah, so most communities do not have an ADA related open space. They just have a general ADA
Right.
grievance policy, and we just didn't have one.
Okay.
I think, if you put it under select board policy, just make a tab on the website that says ADA, and talk about ADA policies under that website and give them a place to go to file a grievance, I guess.
Well, after we get answers to these questions, we'll bring it back. Talk about it some
Talk
more.
about it
Thanks,
again.
Christine.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, so we're going to start to review the warrant articles for fall town meeting. There are several people that are here this evening that have interest in several of the articles, so we'll cover those articles first and then come back and do the rest of them if we have time, depending on how long we take, because we do have one more meeting before town meeting. So if the hour gets to be late, we can defer some to our next meeting. So given that, we'll start with Article 3, Article 2, which is a citizen petition submitted by Mary Donovan. And I did see her here. I think she's still here.
I have some write-up for you
Thank you.
with an apology. It's handwritten because I do not have the internet because I got scammed. This one for you.
Thank you.
And I'm sorry, but my family had to leave due to emergency.
Thank you.
As you know, my name is Mary Donovan, and I wish to thank the town manager, the select board, for inviting me to speak regarding my citizen's petition tonight on the need of having a pet cemetery in town. A pet cemetery will not cost the town or taxpayer extra money. Pet owners pay for casket, grave plot, marker, and maintenance fee. The maintenance fee will go into an interest endowment account for perpetual care, just like Chelmsford human cemeteries. The size of your heart is what really matters. Taking care of family and pets that are children also need a place to rest. A pet cemetery is a place where you can visit to share memories with friends and family, with safety and security from not being hurt for eternity. I thank you for letting me speak tonight, and I do wish that we could have a pet cemetery. I can give you a lot more information on costs and the laws that I'm working on. There is a law right now in the State House and the legislation to be passed to protect pet cemeteries. I am working on it, and when it gets finally signed, I will let you all know. Because, as you know, there's a pet cemetery that was in Tingsboro. I have 6 dogs there now buried under 3 feet of weeds. I can't visit them or I'll be arrested. They have just built a two-family house on part of it. I am going to fight this, and hopefully Chelmsford will learn from what I have experienced and maybe put a pet cemetery here in Chelmsford. It will not cost the town any more money than a human cemetery. Thank you for
Okay,
listening.
If you want to hold just for a minute, does anybody have any questions for Mary?
I am sorry, I can't hear.
I just asked if anybody here has any questions for you about what you presented. And I think Aaron might have some.
I have a question. I think like I might have asked this the last time you were here, Mary,
I'm a
but
little deaf, so until I get my hearing aid.
so I think I may have asked this the last time that you were here, but have you spoken to the Cemetery Commission? Is there any possibility for this to be a Cemetery Commission initiative? I mean, could they set aside a portion of an existing facility to be held as a pet cemetery? And could it be part of that? Is that a possibility, or? it
Paul
seems
reported
kind of
on that
logical?
one meeting that they were not interested.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Their
We've already
policies
talked about
preclude that.
Oh, they do?
And
Oh, okay.
they've been aware of this initiative.
Okay, but I think the idea is that for it to be managed and run in a similar fashion.
In a separate location, yes.
Yes, a separate location, but a similar, yes.
Yes, that's what
Yeah.
it says.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're not interested in managing a pet cemetery.
Okay, thank you.
Who would
That's
manage and maintain it?
the town? I think,
No, it says right in here that the town would not, that it would be publicly,
I had more paperwork, but I figured you had enough.
the article says the pet cemetery would be maintained by owners with a collection of fees by the town of Chelmsford for the use of this land and maintenance services provided by the town.
So,
You would need a commission.
And on town-owned land.
right, so there is a cost to the town just to maintain the land, but who would maintain it if it's not the cemetery commission or the superintendent?
Most likely it would go to Public Works, they're the only other people in town who maintain lands and parks and commons and playgrounds. You know, that's who I would turn to. But that's not gonna come out of this vote, because we haven't identified the piece of land nor designated it for pet cemetery purposes. Town meeting has to do that, much like later on in the town meeting, you're designating land for conservation purposes, you know, for those wet parcels. That's what would have to happen, is you have to identify the parcel and have a vote of town meeting to delegate that use for that.
So what is this vote for?
This in my mind is a resolution. That basically, if town meeting votes this favorably, then the message to me and to the select board is, come back at a future town meeting with a parcel of land that can be voted by the town for that purpose, and any associated budget or other activities that would go with that. Because that would be the natural outcome for this. So town meeting either passes the resolution, and then, you know, what we would have to do if we don't have a piece of town-owned land that's available, we probably would issue an RFP or designate some kind of unique parcel of land, because I believe in order to do this, you need at least 5 acres. Because you have to have the land for the pets to be placed. You also have to have some kind of access and parking for that. And my understanding is this is a 5-acre parcel. So we'd have to come back to town meeting with that piece of land that's allowed for that use. The only land that I know that's not encumbered by the town is 54 Richardson Road, and we know it's not going to go there because of the issue with the water district's well field. Everything else in the town that's of significance is either under the control of the school committee for school properties or under the control of the Conservation Commission this is the discussion we've had prior to this. So again, in my mind, if the town meeting were to pass this resolution, then I think that we would have to go out and identify that land, and then either come back to town meeting with a request to fund the acquisition of that land, or acquire it, or accept it by gift, or whomever it would get to the town, and then designate it for that purpose, and then set up this kind of management control in terms of what fee is going to be collected, and how is that going to be managed, and then who's going to perform the maintenance. And I think it's a perpetual situation. That's what this is looking for. And I think that's what the legislation that Mary's speaking of is, that it's basically in perpetuity. Because, right, this is, because that's what's objected to, and what happened in Tingsboro is that there was a pet cemetery and it was utilized at a later date for another purpose. And I believe the legislation that she's referencing basically provides almost like a permanent perpetual state for a pet cemetery.
Can I ask another question? So if we were even able to identify a parcel of land and set that up, does the DPW have any feedback about whether they are able, or if there are any restrictions for them dealing with that type
But
of
obviously,
business?
we would have those discussions with the DPW director. I haven't to this date. I'm not putting the cart in front of the horse at this point. But I think that's the mechanism.
But if this passes, it kind of forces us to.
Well, it forces, I think it's a directive to the select board. It doesn't force you, it's a directive. The town meeting can't force the select board to do anything. What they're basically doing
Force
is
us to find 5 acres.
passing a resolution, basically requesting that the select board come back with, a viable piece of land at a specified location with a management plan, with a funding plan for a pet cemetery.
And if, so a yes vote means that we would like that investigated, right?
Right.
If the answer comes back again, or that there is no viable land or whatever, it doesn't necessarily mean that we've been non-compliant with this warrant article, because it says we wish. I mean,
Right.
that's
Yeah,
not.
no, there's no penalty for noncompliance, or if you can't come up with anything. But it's basically, I see it as it's directing the board to pursue it. And the board, it can either not pursue it, or they can pursue it, and they can pursue it, and they may not have a favorable outcome, I think is what you're saying. But there's no
Right.
penalty to that.
Yeah, I mean, and I think, based on this conversation, it makes sense. I mean, Mary comes before us once a year at least to talk about this, so let's get her an answer. Either the answer is yes, we can do it here, or no, we can't do it for these reasons. So I guess I would favor.
And the other thing we don't know is what's the demand for this, right?
Right,
It's-
that's
It's
true,
obviously
too.
not happening in many other towns, and it's not happening on the private market. And so one of the other questions, I don't know how I may not be able to answer it, would be, if we go through all this, are we sure that it's going to be utilized?
Well, we could have another survey.
Right. So if town meeting were to vote in the affirmative for this, we could put this on another agenda and say, what are all the different due diligence pieces that we need to go
Exactly, yes.
investigate? But
Right.
we're basically getting the nod from town meeting to go investigate it.
Yeah.
That's what a yes vote means.
Yeah.
We're
Correct.
simply investigating all the details.
Correct.
Yeah, and-
Gauging
and-
interest, I guess.
Right, and town meeting has that right. I mean, they can request
Yeah.
all sorts of things, even aside from a pet cemetery. So this isn't a special thing of how we're handling a pet cemetery. Town meeting has the right to pass resolutions and requests to the select board or to any other board or committee, or even to the legislature if they wanted to.
I'd be happy to further it to town meeting for discussion. I'd be happy to further it to town meeting for discussion.
But the town meeting's going to ask, for a recommendation.
Right, you're right.
Not
And
not
so-
saying you have to do that right now. I'm just saying is
Well, I
before
think we should.
town
I
meeting,
mean,
you have
Mary's
to make a
here.
recommendation.
I think
I'm
we
okay
should
with
vote
that,
on what
yeah.
we want to do. So unless anybody else has comments, I'll ask for a motion.
Were you going to say something, George?
No,
Oh, okay.
I'd be willing to vote to go forward with the vote,
Okay. I think that's what Erin's going to do. She's going to make a motion.
I will make a motion to approve. No,
Recommend approval.
I will make a motion to recommend approval of Article 2, the citizens petition for a pet cemetery at the fall annual town meeting, 2024.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, nobody opposed. Okay, Mary, we've voted to go forward with it.
Okay, do you need more information? I got 2 shopping bags at home.
Well,
I even have 2 pieces of sites, lands. I can
Okay.
also bring that in.
you should go to town meeting.
We have to wait till town
I wanted to go
meeting.
town meeting. I'm working on that.
Okay,
Thank you.
Okay.
thank you. All right, next up is Paul Regazio, who also submitted a citizen petition about transfer of free cash to fund the Parker School feasibility study. So, Mr. Regazio, it's
Yeah, I
Article
just
6.
I just have a short discussion here. And again, I just want to thank the board for allowing me to present my reasoning for Article 6. And thanks for putting it up front on the town meeting agenda. That was somewhat of a surprise to me to find it up front. For those who don't know me and give some background of who I am, my wife and I have been residents here in Chelmsford for over 55 years. We raised our 4 children here, and all 4 attended and graduated from the Chelmsford public schools. Some background on my career: I spent 6 years as a CPA with a international auditing firm, 16 years as a corporate finance manager with a high-tech company, and 15 years as international controller with a local medical supply company. So finance runs deep within my character, as you can see. I am also a supporter of education, as my wife, one of my daughters, and one of my daughter-in-laws are teachers. So I have in support of education. My petition relates to the $1.8 million feasibility study for the new Parker Middle School, which was passed at the May town meeting. However, when passing it, there was no indication as to how the expenditure was to be funded. That was left open, and that was the purpose. And this is the purpose of my petition. After the town meeting, I inquired about the expected surplus for the current fiscal year of the town, which I learned was going to be about $2 million plus, or even maybe more than that. I find out now that it's closer to $4.7 million. In my personal life and in my business life, I never would ask for bank financing if I had available cash on hand or readily accessible. And this is the case we have here. We have $4.7 million surplus for the past current year. If there's available funds, let's use them. Let's not. And why can't we use part of those funds to fund this? And again, we're looking to the future. We're looking to probably $25 million bond issue for the renovation of the fire department, and even a larger bond issue if we go forward with the Parker school system. So again, we don't need to push this debt forward. We have the funds available right now. So my position is, let's not borrow. I think it would be irresponsible to borrow to fund this $1.8 million proposal. Let's use the current cash that we have available, and let's get it behind you. So again, my article requests the town fund this article by transferring from free cash. If the expected state reimbursement does happen, then that money would come back to the state, come back to the town, and we would be able to use it whichever way we want it. So again, hopefully you will all support this article. Any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Did anybody have any questions for Mr. Regazio?
Could we review the current recommendation for the free cash? Because this would come out of that, right?
Yes.
Correct.
I'd just like to have the context. Page 6.
Do you want any discussion on this, or you just reviewing it?
I mean, what would wind up having to give if Article
6.
whatever we're on passes?
6, yeah.
Thank you.
If my understanding is correct, the request is $1.8 million. I think what would give, you can't, well, I shouldn't say you can't. Article 4, the Sewer Construction Stabilization Fund, I think you put that off limits because that's the funding mechanism for the sewer project.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been a perennial town meeting vote every fall, as calculated by the treasurer or finance director, because the sewer debt service was based on the premise that the interest earnings are reinvested into the project. And what the town chose not to do back when they did the sewer project is they didn't get a special act of the legislature that would have automatically done that. So I think that one's off limits, the Article 4. You've got two choices to go through there. The most obvious one is to not fund the roadway and sidewalk construction. Or you forego the other ones or some combination thereof. The reason, let me go back to the premise here. When we funded the feasibility study, it was borrowed. And that borrowing, and 50% reimbursement would, we believe, maybe it's 52, we don't know the exact amount, would be reimbursed to the community over the life of the project, if the project moves forward. What that means and why we borrowed it and why you borrow for the project is the people who are utilizing that facility during the life of the debt are benefiting from the facility. Therefore, I don't have a concern as professionally as manager or professionally as with my academic background of having people who are going to be in that middle school in the year 2030, 2040, the debt goes to 2050, paying through that, whether the interest rate is probably 4%, because they're the ones who are going to benefit from that facility. What I'm proposing for use of free cash primarily is for road and sidewalk construction. The biggest concern we have in this community from the residents that come into my office is on the conditions of the town's roads and streets. We've heard professionally from our public works director about the condition of the town's roads and streets as graded by a professional survey that went through every road and sidewalk of the town, as well as the amount of money that's needed to maintain the current status, because those roads continue like any other asset year by year. And in fact, as we speak now, the MMA is doing another survey on Chapter 90 funding, and we know it's not adequate. So I guess it's a long-winded way of saying is I think if this article is funded, then I think you're not going to have the investment that we're traditionally been doing the last few years to supplement the road and sidewalk construction. And I will say this isn't going to happen in perpetuity. You will hear more of this in the weeks ahead, but I think beyond the end of this current year and the free cash that's generated at the end of this current year, it's going to be a whole new reality financially for this community. We will be talking about changes in town service levels in the months ahead as we're preparing the budget for FY26 because of the inflation and the realities that are out there for the town. So when you can say, oh, just, take a pause on the road and sidewalk construction, well, one is I don't think that's a sound thing, but we also know from having been on the capital plan that our capital needs, even at the level that we're now funding at, aren't going to adequately meet the needs that this town has. So that's the choice that you have. So I'll just stop there.
Mr. Regazio, I'm looking at Article 8 from the Springtown meeting, where the town meeting voted, and the article is worded, to see if the town will vote to appropriate, borrow, or transfer. I thought when that vote was taken, it was with eyes wide open that it was going to be borrowed.
Yeah, that was the
And
vote
it was
of town meeting. It was
borrowed,
borrowed. It was authorized. It's an authorized borrowing of the town.
So your warrant article is suggesting that we revisit that vote, basically?
Well, I'm saying that we now, again, I don't know if the money has been borrowed or not, and this is only, 2-3 months after the town meeting. I was saying we have cash available. We got debt in the future. Let's not add to our future debt. I agree with Mr. Cohen about the roads. I think the roads should be left, but I don't see again, I was unaware of monies that had already been identified to use up the $4.7 million. That was That was not known to me. I don't see any need to put more money in the stabilization fund, the 560,000. And again, the other McCarthy documents, the other 8, 9, 11, 12, 14, those I'm not certain they're really specifically needed. Again, I'm not aware of what they are, so I don't know the details. But I do know we have
Yeah, and in
1.8
fairness to you,
million.
you would have submitted this, you had to have submitted this before that was
I submitted it in
defined.
July.
Yeah.
In May, it was June.
August.
So again, as I've said, we have the free cash. Let's use this. We're going to have debt in the future. Let's not add to our future debt. We have a, fire department, fire requests, 20 million, and we have a major one if we go forward with the Parker School.
And Paul, is the 1.8 million or the 900K, is that over like a 20-year loan?
Yes.
So
Yes, that
it's-
we
so
would,
it's very incremental then?
right, if we.
Spread out over 20 years?
Right, if the project moves forward and 20, whenever, well, it may go to a vote as early as 2026, but if this thing gets approved in 2026 and it's, you then got design, construction, you're probably beginning your debt issuance of permanent debt, probably 2029, John, 2030 or so, and then that would be borrowed to 2050. So this $1.8 million would be spread out over 20 years between 2030 and 2050. So you're roughly talking $100,000 per year plus interest over that period, and the interest rate's about 4%.
And that's with no reimbursement.
That's with no reimbursement. If it's half that, then we're gonna get 900,000 over, so it's roughly 50 some odd $1,000 a year plus interest over the 20-year period from the year 2030 to 2050. I think that's why the state allows you to borrow for feasibility for these types of projects.
So we would borrow the 1.8
Yes.
initially.
Yep.
We would, through the feasibility study and the work that we're doing now, would realize what our rate of reimbursement percentage would be, which we expect to be. I know last time we were at 54 point
Somewhere, yeah.
something percent. We are fairly confident at 52% right now, hoping for more, and we'll get more because we maintain our buildings very well. So, I mean, it's 900 at the end of the day is what we're really talking about here.
What we don't know is if the project fails in
Well, that's the
2026,
other thing,
27,
so-
then how does that get amortized and then reimbursed from the state? I don't know that.
Right.
I doubt that they're gonna reimburse us 20 years out for a failed feasibility study. I just have never, just am not
No,
aware of
I
how
would
that's
think if they're
done.
gonna fund it, they're gonna fund it
Right,
forthright.
and just be done with it, right?
Okay, George or Aaron, any comments?
Well, I'm sure a lot of people are looking to see their taxes reduced a little bit. I mean, I know,
Well, yeah.
What's the budget this year?
The budget this year is about $167 million, plus or minus.
but I also know, as I didn't finish,
Yeah.
there are many, many requests, so it's a very difficult situation.
Sure, yeah. Aaron, anything?
I know Paul has fought for this a couple of years in a row now, right? Haven't you presented this
No,
in other
no.
years?
No, I presented money, in the past, my presentations was basically to use the surplus to reduce the current tax rates, but I thought this was, where we have a $1.8 million expenditure, we have surplus funds, let's use it, let's not create, again, I don't know what the other articles 8 through 14 are, I don't know what those are specifically. I
Okay,
do know we have, $16 million stabilization fund. We don't need to be adding more money to that. That does nothing to the current.
Yeah, so to that point, can I ask, in your opinion, I guess Paul or anybody's, not contributing to the stabilization fund,
What's the question?
what is your opinion on that? I'd be curious to hear.
Well,
I mean, we just got our,
Right, the
Amazing bond
I
rating.
mean, we can slide to that article if you want. If you want to cover Article 15.
because to Virginia's question, there really isn't anything else. The documentation digitization we have to do because that's
Right.
to meet
Well, we
the
don't
state
have to do
requirement,
anything.
right?
I think what you're looking at with the stabilization fund is where are we relative to the recommended percentage? And then with the economic climate and the financial climate that we're anticipating and the challenges, do we want a little more cushion in that stabilization fund? Those are the two fundamental
Yeah.
questions for me.
Right.
I think I know Paul's
Right.
feelings on that, but
Well, because
wouldn't mind hearing them again.
even if we put this money into the stabilization fund, it will still be within the policy range that the select board has of between 5 and 10% of our general operating reserves. And I think and I think the fact that I'm putting the $500,000 in there will enable the town to get through a very challenging period in the next couple of years ahead. We've talked about this, ad nauseum, and I've sent information to the board as recently as 6 months ago, but also we'll be having these discussions as early as next month. Nothing is breaking the way for cities and towns and state government. Wage inflation, health insurance inflation, our retirement assessment, utility costs, and on it goes. And the demand for services. And so we are going to have a discussion as a community about how do we navigate that period without violating the principles of living beyond the recurring needs of the town. And that's why we've done things like this, and what I hope to do in the future is to use a stabilization fund to, as the word suggests, to stabilize the town during a challenging period, because as I said, we're not going to be able to put $2.5 million in the foreseeable future into the roads, but we may have to draw from the stabilization fund perhaps to do those kinds of investments without throwing things a kilter in terms of the town's ability to provide service going forward. Those are going to be the discussions that we're going to have in the months and probably years ahead. And that's why I think, as I said, we at this point, when I see this request, it's a different request, because this isn't going to provide tax relief to anybody. Over $900,000 over a 20-year period that begins 4 years from now, potentially, is going to have, it's not going to have any appreciable relief for the community. What I think it's going to do is it's going to hinder our continued investment in the infrastructure of the town, which is what those other articles are attempting to do. In terms of the digitization, in terms of the issue of the playing fields, the courts at McCarthy School, and so forth, and particularly the roads. So I think that's the choice that the community is going to have to make at town meeting.
Paul, let me, by maintaining the appropriate size stabilization fund, as we move on, should we find that the town has the fortitude to support a schools project or something like that, that would be a major borrowing for the town. Our bond rating is affected by what we keep in our stabilization fund to a certain degree, and helps keep our rating where we need to be, so that we're borrowing at a much more favorable rate, saving money that way, which could potentially offset easily something of this magnitude.
As your town accountant, Darlene Lucy, reported at the last meeting, they look at the town's undesignated fund balance, or reserves. And you're right. If we're going to borrow for a school project that's in the hundreds of millions of dollars, without exaggeration, and you can affect a better interest rate on the town's 50% plus portion. Let's say it's a $250,000 project. It's like $125 million town cost, and you could affect a better interest rate on $125 million. Then that would more than offset whatever you would save by the $900,000 return.
Right, and this is one of those things that I think might keep us from positioning ourselves to take advantage of various opportunities during a very down time. So we need to be careful how we go along in situations like this. And it's very meritable, and the initial premise is thoughtful and so on. But I think when you really look at all the different things that it could affect us in the future, I'm not sure that this is worth it.
And so I'll give my comments on it. As has been noted, we did pass a warrant article in the spring regarding this. I'm comfortable with how that went and what that provides for us going forward. So if everybody's ready to vote, and I think everyone is.
Would you like it in the affirmative?
Why don't you do it how you would want to do it?
Okay. I will make a motion to not recommend Article 6 to fall town meeting as presented.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, and the motion is not to recommend approval. All in favor of not recommending approval?
Aye.
Okay, and that's 5-0, that's unanimous. Okay. All right, thanks, Paul.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is, we will take Article 16. That's the fire stations. You're going to do the presentation? Okay.
Good evening, members of the board. I'm going to present Article 16 on behalf of the Fire Station Study Committee. And on the title page there, I provided a link to the website that's been created where one can find summary information and all kinds of detailed information, videos, as well as documents, depending on how you like to learn. We're trying to put as much information as we can out there for the public. So I'm going to cover the warrant article itself, a little bit about the work that we did in coming up with the recommendations, and then we'll take a look at the data relative to the proposed reconstruction, including the debt service and the concept layouts and cost. So first up is warrant article 16, just you can go to the next slide, Paul. The bottom line of why warrant article 16. So the committee is recommending $25 million for the construction and renovation projects at Station 3, which is located at 260 Old Westford Road, and Station 5, which is located at 295 Acton Road. When the costs were rolled up, they came between 20 and 25 million, and so at town meeting, the town manager is going to request an allocation of 25 million. It came down to two things. From a public safety standpoint, when we went through all of our trades, there was no scenario that was acceptable that involved closing either Station 3 or Station 5. And we'll talk about that in a bit. And then given that, if we need Station 3 and Station 5 from a public safety standpoint, those stations have gone past their useful life, and there are safety and other concerns related to their current conditions. The next slide I just put in for your reference. It's the language of the article and the language of the ballot language that Manager Cohen got approved by the state. So if I go next to just the work of the Fire Station Committee, this slide you've seen before. It gives an overview of the approach that we took. I just wanted for the public to introduce the committee. Chief Ryan, Town Manager Cohen, and I. We have two firefighter representatives. Rob Albon is a resident in Chelmsford and is the president of the Firefighters Union. Greg Signini grew up in Chelmsford as a Chelmsford High graduate and is the secretary-treasurer of the union. We also have two resident members, Cheryl O'Donnell and Bob Destrempe. Cheryl is a retired state police officer with 23 years of service with the state police, and she spent 18 years of her career assigned to the office of the state fire marshal as a certified fire and explosive investigator. Bob is a career firefighter. He has served in the city of Lowell for 30 years, and he has been a deputy fire chief in the city of Lowell for 11 years. You can go to the next slide, Paul. So this is just an overview of the stations and the station conditions. The two stations that we're talking about are Station 3 in the lower left and Station 5 in the lower right. Again, the building lifespan for a public building is 50 years, and these are both well beyond that. And then we have issues with the fire stations and the safety conditions for our firefighters, as well as the ability to accommodate the needs of a modern fire department operations and also changing staff, and we'll talk about that in a bit. So just a quick review of the success factors on the next slide, Paul. We traded off 5 different parameters as we went through different scenarios. We looked at the condition of the stations themselves. How many do we have, what condition they are in, and how are they used? We looked at the staffing and firefighter safety, both from the standpoint of how many firefighters are on an apparatus and the shift strength in staffing, as well as span of control and how we handle the command at a scene. The apparatus, in terms of what do we use today in our modern fire department, how is it used and how is it housed, and then the response times, which come down to public safety. And in response times, we looked at both the response time for the first due company on scene and the response time for the second due company on scene, because they have very different functions and they're both critical when you're considering your ability to respond to the emergency. We'll talk about that in a little bit. So on the next slide, our bottom line recommendation is that we recommend maintaining 5 stations for the town of Chelmsford. We looked at 3, 4, and 5 station configurations. The 3-station configuration in any approach that we took was unacceptable from a standpoint of public response time. There were too many areas in town where we didn't have an adequate first company response time or an adequate second. And then the 4 and 5 station scenarios, both of those are going to require a reconstruction of stations 3 and 5, regardless of which one you pick. We recommend staying with the 5-station configuration due to the maintenance of the public response times. And then it would also just allow flexibility if we needed it in the future to operate in a 4-station scenario. The next slide summarizes the issues with stations 3 and 5. They're detailed in the Appendix A in your packet. And I also put in the upper right a link to a video where you can visually see the conditions of the stations as hosted by the Chelmsford Fire Department. So in terms of firefighter safety and operations, if you look first at the top 2 pictures where the white box is, that white box are the sleeping quarters at engine 5. You can see that it's only a few feet away from the engine. It is physically inside the apparatus bay, and the firefighters are hanging their gear right outside on the outside wall of the sleeping quarters. In the bottom middle, you can see how tight the sleeping quarters are at stations 3 and 5. And one of the issues that we have, a major issue that we have here, are the sleeping quarters are, and the living quarters for the firefighters are very close to the apparatus bay, where there are carcinogens from the vehicle and also carcinogens from equipment when they come back from a fire, the equipment off gases contaminants. There are no decontamination facilities in stations 3 and 5, either for the equipment or acceptably isolated showers for the firefighters when they come back from a call. The stations were also not built for a multi-gender workforce, so the sleeping quarters are very tight, and you can see in the lower left, the bathrooms were built for an all-male workforce. And if you look at the picture that's in the middle on the left, it looks a little bit crowded and hard to see, and what you're seeing there is the overcrowding in the apparatus space. So the red is the fire engine. In the foreground, you see the fitness equipment for the firefighters is housed right in the apparatus bay, again with all the air contaminants. And then if you peer close enough through that fitness equipment, you'll see the emergency rescue boat that's used for Heart Pond. And so one of the operational concerns becomes for one, the firefighters cannot use both doors in the stations for entrance and egress because the apparatus bays are so overcrowded. And then trucks today are bigger than they used to be, and we have different equipment such as the rescue boat and other things that need to be adequately housed in the stations. So if you go to the next slide, the left side is the heat map for the 5-station scenario. In this map, red is good. Red is the fastest that it takes an engine to get to a call from its site, and then yellow and green and orange are longer response times. So in the lower left is where Station 5 is, and then if you go up the side of the west side of Chelmsford, right above that is where Station 3 is. And you could kind of visually see that if you were to pluck either one of those stations out and retire it, you would have an issue with response times. And we got a detailed analysis done professionally to look at all the different factors that were involved there. The right side shows ideally where you'd like to be in an end state for the staffing. The national standards that are scientifically based call for 4 firefighters per apparatus. We currently typically operate with 2. Most communities pragmatically can't get to 4 from a cost standpoint. We're trying to get to 3 wherever we can, like several comparable communities do. So in the 5-station scenario, there are a couple of compromises in terms of we would still need to cross-staff apparatus at the center station, and then we would still have 2 stations staffed with only 2 firefighters. From an operations standpoint, both the fire chief and the firefighters were comfortable with that level of compromise. If you go to the next slide, the committee looked at how the population changes over time, and you've seen this slide before. When the stations were built in the 1960s and 1970, our population has since more than doubled. And if you go down to the green table on the lower left, Chief Ryan had data over 2 decades in terms of the overall calls and the number of medical calls. And you can see how the number of calls has increased, and also the medical calls are escalating over time. One thing that I found interesting, when we first built out this table, we didn't have the 2023 data. And if you look at just the change from 2022, where there were 6,020 calls, to 2023, where there's 6,354 calls. In 1 year, we had over 300 more calls. And that was very telling to me when I looked at that. And then kind of in the bottom of that table, just a comment that as the population and the call needs have grown in the town, our staffing today is still about what it was 25 years ago. That hasn't changed. The box on the lower right are other factors that are going to affect population and increased demand for calls that I think you're all familiar with. The next slide just gives you a little bit of insight into what we mean by first and second due response time. One of the key responsibilities of the first due company is victim safety and immediate fire suppression. That first due company only has enough water for 3 minutes if they expend that water at a maximum rate. So the second due company is responsible for providing water on scene beyond 3 minutes. And in some of these scenarios that I said were unacceptable, that second due company arrived way too late to be able to continue to put water on scene. The next slide just gives you a sense for some of these scenarios that a firefighter responds to. We've been talking mostly about structure fires. As you saw in the previous slide, the medical emergency calls are increasing over time, so they get called. Again, it's the time for that EMT or the EMS crew to arrive on scene. They respond to motor vehicle accidents and also mutual aid requests from other communities. And it literally comes down to, response times literally come down to life or death or preservation or loss of property. The other thing that I want to point out is I mentioned in staffing, but also in response times, when we looked at the criteria for the response times, those are based on National Fire Protection Association standards, which are scientific-based. They're based on data and analysis that the National Fire Protection Agency did. In the next slide, there is a very outdated OSHA standard that was established in 1980 for firefighters. Chief Ryan and Paul have been tracking an update whose release is imminent, and you can see on the left side of the chart the categories of things that are going to be modified. We were most concerned with the bottom one in facility safety, and essentially what's happening is the OSHA standards are now going to have more stringent requirements when it comes to contaminants and carcinogens and air quality for our firefighters. So if we don't do something about stations 3 and 5, we are essentially going to be non-compliant with the OSHA standards. Next slide, please. The next one, Paul, is fine. So I'll talk a little bit about the Permanent Building Committee engaged Weston and Sampson to get us better data on cost and concept. And so what you're looking at now is the concept for Station 3 by Roberts Field. The apparatus bay would remain untouched. The yellow box that you see to the right of that would be an addition, single floor addition to that station. And the floor plan layout is shown on the right side of the slide. So kind of the bottom line, the green areas are decontamination facilities for both equipment and people. And then you can see that the physical fitness and the living spaces are all adequately isolated from the contaminated areas. The cost estimates went from 8.5 to 10.5 million, depending on whether you do modular or stick build. I think the building committee and the chief's sense is based on past experience. This may be a good candidate for a modular build. It's single story, and the space would accommodate that. And then again, the possible range for both together was 20 to 25 million. If you go to the next slide, this is Station 5. Station 5 gets a little more challenging because it's on a very small, funny-shaped lot. And so because of that, we would have to demolish and reconstruct the entire building, and that would wind up being a 2-story building. You can see the floor plan layouts for the first and the second floor. Again, the green areas provide adequate decontamination facilities for gear and people. And then the exercise and all the living spaces are separate from that, either on the first floor, with the majority of the living spaces all up on the second floor. In terms of the debt service itself, Finance Director John Sousa helped us with some analyses. And so we assumed the $25 million debt. Hopefully it'll be better than that. But if you look at the average assessed home in Chelmsford, they would see a tax differential for this project of about $157 in the first year, which translates to about $3 a week. There's a box there. I just want to point out that on the website of the Fire Station Committee website, one can go in and there's a tool that Director Sousa helped build out where you can calculate the tax impact for your specific address. And then there's other sources like the Senate bill I've mentioned before that we are still continuing to track to see if there's any movement on that. The next slide is a slide Mr. Sousa put together for us to show the historical and projected debt service as it relates to this project. You can see in the green or the circle there, in fiscal 24, we paid off the sewer. In fiscal 25, in the purple, the secondary school building projects will be paid off. And then in fiscal 26, the debt service for the 2 fire stations would come in at a gross of $2.25 million. Because the school building debt service is coming off, the net effect on the debt service is the 1.42 that you see in the blue square at the bottom. And then that would also mean that the 157 for the average household would also be a little bit less than that. And then the last slide is just a snapshot of the public education opportunities that are available. It shows you what's available on the website, as I mentioned before. We also have a number of events coming up or that we're present at in the community. And specific to this committee, we'll be doing tours on the 5th, a public information session on the 10th, and then if this passes at town meeting, we'll also have a public open Q&A on the 29th before the November ballot. Any questions?
Anybody have any questions for Virginia? All right, George, Pat?
If not, I'll take my seat.
Going once, going twice.
I have a question for Chief Brian. Chief, when's the last time Station 5 was closed for a day or more?
For a day,
Or more?
I would say for a day, probably during the summer,
This
just for
summer?
a day.
Okay. With increased manpower, I think Paul's committed to 13, is that right? If we approve this project?
Well, we'd have to come back at a future town meeting and appropriate funding to add one additional firefighter per shift, which would be 4 firefighters. That was on the staff.
Right, but, so based under this operation, there is the possibility that 5 could still be closed periodically if we have.
I don't
I know,
envision it because we would be adding 1 firefighter per shift. So, could it close? Certainly, because, so if there's an emergency, but
But adding that 1 firefighter per shift alleviates the problem of when somebody calls out, not having somebody to go fill that shift or something along those lines? Does that
So right
solve
now,
that
it
problem?
wouldn't add to what we call swing shifts. So, and I'll give you an example. When I started, we had 3. So when we opened up the 3rd position at Engine 2 back in 2017, we took one of those swing positions. So every unit, we got 4, went from 3 swing positions to 2.
Right.
So the issue you're talking about closing the station, so if somebody's out on a vacation, sick, personal, or somebody went home the other day in an emergency, yes, on occasion, if we can't fill it through overtime, we will close. It's my hope that, with the additional staffing, we're going to see less of that. But I can't guarantee it won't happen.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, that's what
Okay.
I wanted to know.
Chief? You all set?
Almost it.
How long ago was it when it was closed for a very long period of time?
So it closed 2008
I think it was
through
later.
2000, and we opened up in 2011.
Yeah, the great.
Under
yeah,
Chief Curran.
The Great
But
Recession.
Yeah,
your
exactly.
brother's, your brother's house burnt down at that time, didn't it?
Mhm.
Yeah, we had a couple of, when the station was closed, you lost a couple of houses over there?
2009, I believe, if the one you're
I think
talking
you're
about.
right, yeah.
Yeah. Correct.
Was it that long ago? Wow.
It was a long
Believe
time
it-
ago.
believe it or not, yeah.
And then you may recall, when we opened the station up in 2011, we had a fire down the street on Park Road, right by the country club.
Yeah, how long was that closed for at that time?
3 years.
3 years.
3 years. Thankful it's open.
Thank you.
Okay. Aaron, any questions? All right, we ready to take a motion then?
I'll make a motion to recommend Article 16 to fall town meeting as presented.
George, you want a second?
I'll second for discussion.
Okay. All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I guess I'll take this opportunity to say my piece on this, and it's worthy work. I guess I have to be really careful how I say this, because I am in favor of giving the fire department and the entire group everything that they need to be safe and to live safely and provide correctly for the community. If I thought that this fixed that problem once and for all, I think I would jump right on it, but it doesn't. It gives us good facilities, and I'm not opposed to good facilities, so, part of me wants to vote for it just so that these guys have the right place to be when they're at work. But the fact that, there were still issues remaining at the end of the day, and I think, I'm not saying that, I have all the answers to this, but I think, we'd be better suited to possibly go to a three-station configuration, keeping in mind that we still need to cover a lot of the area for medical calls, but our fire calls are obviously down and our medical calls are up. Because of that, we can't fill the fire station to protect these men and women the way we should. If we were under a three-station configuration with the appropriate manpower, we'd be able to have 2 men in, 2 men out, and all of the other considerations. So we still don't get there with this because we still have potential where we show up to an incident, a fire, or something along those lines where we can't act as quickly as we'd like to because we don't have the manpower. I think we'd be better suited to find a way to have the appropriate number of people in each station. I think,
May I comment on that?
Well, let him finish.
I think, and I've seen this, I've been looking at this for 15, 20 years, so I'm very familiar with the whole operation and how it goes, having been involved in the other 2 fire stations that were done over the years. So I understand the need for the coverage, and I wonder if, we might have been served to think about maybe putting ambulance or something in 5 and over in East or something along those lines, and building a new station up on 110 that helps get us the best response time for fire-related, but also having the appropriate manpower to respond and get right to work. So I just wish we were solving the issue, because we're going to be right back here in a year or 2 looking for more manpower, and the same arguments are going to be had, that we're leaving these people in an unsafe condition, and this doesn't fix it, and I wish it did.
Okay, Virginia?
Just for clarification, and I invite Chief also to speak to it, the reason that we looked in depth at a 3-station configuration and putting a 3rd station in the vicinity of Route 110 and Hunt Road. And what happened with those response time maps were there were too many portions in town where the response time was even off this map. It was in the white, which means your response times were greater than 8 minutes. And there was no configuration that we could come up with for 3 stations that gave us an acceptable response time. And I remember that meeting clearly. As soon as we got the response time data, Chief Ryan said that's not acceptable. And so we had some discussion around it, and that is why we eliminated the 3-station configuration. Do you want to add anything?
And if I could add to that, I remember having that conversation and recognizing that in East Chelmsford in particular, where I live, the response time would have been 8 minutes. And, if you have a kid that's not breathing or something like that, that's not okay. So that was about the point
If you
where
have a fire, you don't have water on scene either.
Yes, yeah. So those response times were really kind of what put me over the. I do agree with a lot of what you're saying, though, actually. But those response times, when you look at them at the end of the day, it just didn't. It was kind of a no-go after that conversation for me.
Just with where we're heading, budget-wise and things like that, I just really feel like, let's get it right. Let's put this issue to bed. Let's get them the right amount of manpower. So I think that's what we should be talking about here. And granted, I don't want to see these guys. I've been a proponent for these guys for years. I've been out. I took it on the chin getting the building next door approved. So I'm all for giving these folks the right equipment, the right buildings, but I just don't feel it solves the problem. And we're going to be back here thinking about it again, so I'd like to solve the problem.
This is what we have before us this evening, and we have a motion and a second. So I'm going to ask for a vote. So those in favor of recommending approval? Aye.
Aye.
And opposed?
Opposed.
Okay, thank you. All right. Is anybody here for Article 18 to speak to it?
Yes, David Hedison is
Okay.
on the line, and he's also, he's on the line, yeah,
Okay,
on the
all
Zoom
right.
call.
So we can take him next. I'm sure Harrison is just waiting with bated breath out there to come up.
Good evening, David.
Okay, good evening. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much. I had met with you previously to discuss this project and have been before Community Preservation and the Finance Committee. We are looking for $2.6 million for a more than $40 million project over at Chelmsford Arms on 1 Smith Street. We're looking to use that $2.6 million to leverage an additional $30+ million from state and federal resources. We're looking at 64 units being replaced with approximately 96 units. We have engaged SV architects who will begin the master planning. And our hope is with this local support, we can kick off this project. As many of you know, this is a 1969 development. We have over $15 million of deferred maintenance, and these buildings they're tired, they're old, and they need to really be replaced up to code. If we're able to secure the support of the community, we will be moving forward with these plans. And just as far as CPC funds are concerned, the bonding of this would be approximately, the 10% of what's set aside. We have Chelmsford Woods coming off, I want to say in 2028, and this would may have overlap for a year or two, but I believe we'll be in a good place with CPC for the next 10 years plus with this project and be able to serve the senior population that continues to age. And to add 32 units to an additional site, going from 2 stories to 3 stories, will be, a great thing to do.
Okay, does anybody have any questions for David? Apparently not. So how about if we have a motion?
I will make a motion to recommend Article 18 to fall town meeting as presented.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Very good, David. We'll see you at town meeting.
Yes, thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. All right, now we're going to skip back to Article 11, which is a document digitization.
Yes, good
proposal.
evening, members of the board. Madam Chair, my name is Harrison Mayo. I am the Departmental Support Coordinator for the Town Clerk's Office. I'm here to speak to you tonight regarding Article 11. To date, the Town Clerk's Office has worked to improve the preservation of the town's historical records. This has been through environmental and physical preservation efforts, more space-efficient shelving, implementation of climate controls, and restoration of high-risk historical records. During the restoration of these historical records, the Northeast Document Conservation Center scanned these records, and many are available on Internet Archive or the town's website, but are not easily searchable in their current format. Looking at the building department's office, you'll see that there are some space constraints. The large rolling shelves in their office take up a significant amount of their area. The goal with the building department space would be to free up the area used by those shelves and relocate those records to a more spacious and controlled environment. The LLO3 storage area has more capacity. It's currently used for planning and zoning permanent records. This space presents an opportunity for better organization and consolidation of land use related files. Even with organized physical records, locating specific files, particularly older ones, can take staff a lot of time. Searching through paper records can delay the internal workflows and responses to public requests that the town staff have. With a strong document management system, all digitized records will be indexed and searchable, and it will allow the staff and public to locate the documents instantly online, and with no risk compared to handling the physical record. With this project, our goals include the digitization of these permanent departmental records, ensuring that digitized records are fully indexed and searchable, creation of a public access portal for easy retrieval for staff and the public, consolidation of building, planning, and zoning files, and clearing space in the building department's office. To achieve these goals, our request for free cash from fiscal '25 is $300,000. This would fund the document management system's annual fee, the one-time training and setup costs associated with that system, building, planning, and zoning scanning, which is approximately 1.87 million pages, including many large format maps, accounting phase 1, which is approximately 1 million pages, and fire prevention, which is approximately 17,500 pages. Looking to future years, we'll seek to digitize permanent and long-term records across the town's departments, looking to create efficiencies across all functions. Thank you for your time, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to address them.
Any questions for Harrison? Apparently not. So we'll take a motion.
I'll make a motion to recommend Article 11 to fall town meeting as presented.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we have, I think by my calculation, about 14 more articles to do. Is that about right, Paul?
Yeah, but about more than half of them are consent agenda. I mean, it will move pretty quick if you
We've
want.
heard that before.
No, it will. No, I mean, we presented at Finance Committee, and we went through it pretty quick. And
Let's get it done.
I think you just want to get it done, and then.
What's the sense of the board? You want to stay here another half hour and?
Yeah.
I'd rather give it time.
Yeah, let's knock it out.
All right, so let's go back to Article 3.
Article 3.
Paul speaks quickly.
I will.
Do it like you're at town meeting, Paul.
He's a pro.
Yeah, we should set a
Article 3,
timer.
all right, Article 3 is $60,000. This is a, recurring cemetery request article. And again, it's to complete the paving at Pine Ridge Cemetery, install drainage improvements at West Cemetery, and expand a dozen two-grave lots over at Hart Pond Cemetery.
Any questions about Article 3? We'll take a motion.
I'll make a motion to recommend Article 3 to fall town meeting as presented.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Article 4 is a sewer construction stabilization fund. John Souza's been sitting there patiently in the back of the room, so we'll have John quickly touch upon this and explain why this is here.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. So this is an article I know that you've seen in recent, and for many years, as the town manager described earlier. What this is the, under Mass General Law, the interest earnings that we earn each year on sewer betterment funds and on the sewer capital improvement fund, which is that's included in the sewer user rate that everyone pays, flow to the general fund. So what happens is at the end of every fiscal year, the interest flows into free cash. And so this mechanism is necessary. We need a vote at town meeting so that we can set aside the interest earnings on these two accounts into the sewer construction stabilization fund so we can use them to pay debt service for the sewer project in future years.
Any questions for John? Okay, we'll take a motion.
I'll make a motion to recommend Article 4 to fall town meeting as presented.
Second?
Okay, a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Article 5.
Article 5 is no action.
All right, that's easy.
That's easy. Now moving on to Article 7. Article 7 is roadway and sidewalk construction. As I mentioned earlier, we're seeking to appropriate $2.5 million to fund roadway and sidewalk construction. Again, I don't want to repeat what we said earlier, but we're level funded for, I think it's the past dozen years for Chapter 90, which comes from the gas tax. We have received $500,000 in road construction and maintenance funding from the fair share / millionaire's tax. But even despite all this, the cost of inflation basically means we're only funding about a third of what we need to do to maintain the town's roadway and sideway infrastructure, even with the additional $775 from the capital budget. Our Public Works Director, Christine Clancy, is here. She developed this list, and she can sort of speak to, like, well, what are you going to do with the money? Go ahead, Christine.
Thank you. So We do have a lot of needs. We have 187 miles of roadway. We've done a lot of paving and sidewalk improvements in the past 2 years. Just this past year, we've done just under 10 miles of roadway, $3.3 million, 2.5 miles of sidewalk, $1.1 million. So really moving forward to maintain the pavement index or the rating that we have and maintain the maintenance that we're doing on our roadways, as Paul had said, we need to continue to spend closer to that $4 or $5 million. So that we would be proposing this $2.5 million to go towards the roadway and sidewalks, and we have a preliminary list here of paving candidates. So we do publish the list annually. Of what is actually on the list, but we have a list internally we track, and this is all through our pavement data management database and our sidewalk management database. It's really an algorithm on how the roads are and compared to other roads in town, and we also drive these roads to verify that that is the latest, because sometimes some roads can deteriorate at a faster rate if there's construction within that roadway or for other various reasons. So this paving candidate list that you see, it's about 10 miles of roadway, $4.1 million. And for sidewalks, we have some large areas. Turnpike Road, we already have $500,000 from Complete Streets to do a new sidewalk between Billricker Road and Warren Ave. That because there's a bridge construction required there, it's a very costly project of about just over $1 million. So we would be looking to fund part of that balance with this additional money or the remaining the needs. Parkerville Roadway, that is a federal funding project that we received $350,000, but also to go to Town Line, we would need some additional funds. So, and then Main Street. Main Street has come up a lot. Has come up, I think, going back a few years of pavement needs, but also looking at ways to do more traffic calming and have some improvements by adding sidewalks. So we would look to also potentially whether phasing it or at least start with a design to see how we could improve Main Street from School Street to Groton Street. So this list, obviously, almost $7 million. We can't spend all of that, but we would go through this list and publish that list this typically January.
Okay, any questions about roadway and sidewalk construction? If not, how about a motion?
I'll make a motion to recommend Article 7 to fall town meeting as presented.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. It's unanimous. Thank you.
Article 8 is the McCarthy Middle School recreational area, the site of the former tennis courts behind the police station. It's a request for $975,000 from free cash. This is the conceptual design for the project. You can see the police station is to the top, the McCarthy School area is to the right. You may recall this was previously brought to town meeting and it was tabled. And we've come back. The superintendent has formed a study committee, and the final version of this plan will go through the study committee and to the school committee prior to town meeting. But in essence, this is the concept. To the left are 2 tennis courts. To the middle is 2 street hockey courts. And then to the right is a basketball court. And also the issue with the tennis courts, as you also could line those for pickleball if that's to occur. There also would be a pedestrian walkway that would go from the McCarthy School up to the police station parking area. And Christine has noted that Public Works is, if you look at the top there by the parking area of the police station, they may be able to add a few more parking spaces at the police station to expand that as well. So when this is done, basically with the work that's just being completed now over at the high school, with the new tennis courts, the basketball courts, and pickleball courts, and this area at McCarthy, we really will have addressed the outdoor recreational needs in the community by replicating facilities that had been longstanding. Obviously, the high school courts are a replication of what had been there. As I mentioned at an earlier meeting, we moved over the street hockey courts over here to McCarthy, which actually is 2 things better. It tends to be played by middle school students, and also we have a lot of support through the Police Athletic League by the police station, so that may make it more accommodating there as well for improvement. So again, this would allow for those outdoor recreational uses, and also with the concerns that we keep hearing about pickleball. The pickleball primarily be at the high school, which again, there's no residential impact at its location over there, and then here, if it's over in the school grounds, if it were to create a concern, then it's able to be monitored and concerned. For example, I think they're the best locations that we could identify in the community for pickleball. So that's the concept. And if this is approved, again, work would be designed over the winter months and hopefully out to bid next spring and summer.
Okay, any questions about Article 8?
With the pickleball courts in town, are we looking at like sound absorption?
Well, we're not at the high school because there's no residential impact at the high school. And even at McCarthy, there may not be a need either because generally you're not allowed to use the school courts when schools are in session. So if it were to become an issue at the police station, we would look at that issue of either eliminating the pickleball courts or looking at some sound absorption or some efforts at the police station itself, because they would really be the only true abutter. The problem we've seen in other
You
communities.
wouldn't hear it across the street?
I don't think you'd hear it across the street at that distance, because we've just not seen any successful route on sound absorption that has been accepted in communities where they object to pickleball. And we've seen it in Newton, we've seen it on some Cape communities. We just haven't found the panacea that solves the pickleball noise issue. So again, that's all the more reason that if we're ever going to accommodate pickleball, that it'd be at the school complex sites.
Okay, any other questions? Can I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to recommend Article 8 to Fall Town Meeting as presented.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thank you.
Article 9 is a replacement of the sewer force main on Progress Avenue. This is a $125,000 request, and this would be funded from the Sewer Enterprise Fund retained earnings, which is basically their undesignated cash, because you may recall they're a separate account, and Christine's going to just provide a summary of this project.
Hi. So Progress Ave, we have many force mains across town. This is one of our newer force mains. A lot of our force mains were installed in the 1980s. They really should have a lifespan of 50 to 70 years. We do have some deterioration of some of our infrastructure, and we are embarking on preventative measures to do inspections. Progress Ave is one location where we've unfortunately had two emergency repairs just this past year, one this July and one January. And here's a picture of the pipe. As you see, it's very ductile iron, very thin. The deterioration is either, my guess is it could be external to the soil. The soil could be acidic. It could also be potentially from something inside the pipe. But anyway, we had two force main repairs, and with those repairs we're looking at, and both repairs were in relatively close locations just from the pump station shown on Progress Ave. What we had previously test pitted further up towards Bill Ricker Road, and we believe there's a good or better pipe, something in this section. Like I said, I don't know what is causing the force main to deteriorate at a quicker rate. But what we're proposing is to replace 800 feet of main, and this would hopefully prevent us from having any future or any near-term, or more longer-term too, breaks. We looked at doing this externally, potentially looking at putting out to bid. You're talking probably a few $100,000 by putting it out to bid. It was actually our superintendent, Dan Belkis. He came in and he said he thinks that we could do this in-house. This force main is relatively shallow, so when we have deeper force mains, that's where you have more different size different trench boxes. Is a lot more difficult excavation. This is relatively, really shouldn't be any groundwater issues. We have a corridor where we don't have to do bypass, so this is really a great project for us to be able to do something in-house. And with that, we will have significant savings, and which is why we're estimating $150,000 as opposed to potentially a few $100,000. Sorry, the amount.
125.
125, sorry, $125,000. And with that, we are proposing to replace it with HDPE, just so that there's no further deterioration if that is part of the factor. And so part of that $125,000 is for purchase of trench box, purchase of plates, just to make sure we have the right equipment, and also purchase of that fusing. It does have to be HDPE fused pipe, similar to what you see what the gas company does. And we're proposing to do this all in-house. That's it.
Okay, any questions about Article 9?
You got the manpower, Christine, to pull that off without anything else suffering?
Sure. So we talked about this, and I think this is a great project for us because, like I said, down 5 to 6 feet, and we would probably start this in the winter. So, you know, earlier on December, so right after town meeting, we probably start this. So we do feel confident that this is a good project for us. Anything deeper or, you know, more in depth, we probably would outsource this, but I think this is a good project for us. So yes, we will have the resources.
Great. Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, we'll take a motion.
I'll make a motion to recommend Article 9 to fall town meeting as presented.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, unanimous. Thank you. Article 10.
Article 10 is $650,000 from Sewer Enterprise Fund retained earnings to address sewer infiltration and inflow.
So this is another sewer system improvement project where previously at town meeting was appropriated to design this project. So now we're at a point where this project has been designed as part of the in recent assessments. About 12% of the area we have found, looking for sources of infiltration or inflow as part of that process in 2023. Because we have a newer system, a lot of the leakage is found at manholes, not necessarily in the pipelines. So Weston and Sampson had recommended 200 locations across town that we could line. It's a pretty substantial project. We do, if we find some, here and there, one or two, we'll hire the resources to line just those couple manholes. But with 200 manholes, this really is a much larger project. So the estimate that funds needed is $650,000. In this work, again, this is something that can happen in the winter. Lining, I mean, as long as it's not really below sub-zero, extreme cold conditions or during inclement weather. But this is something too that can occur relatively quickly and potentially go into the spring. This is just one of the efforts among our many efforts to try to address the infiltration and try to regain some of the capacity that we need.
Any questions on Article 10? Okay, take a motion.
I'll make a motion to recommend Article 10, to fall town meeting as presented.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Thank you. So we've already done 11. We'll go over to Article 12.
Article 12 is $75,000 from free cash for a tree and invasive species inventory and management plan.
So the tree committee has been talking about this for quite some time. We have tried to apply for various grants, and really this is something that's becoming very much needed. Other communities, neighboring communities too, have begun this process or have committed to this process and have it funded. So really, we have a tree canopy that is declining. It is kind of an alarming number, about 1% a year. And if you hear pictured, a lot of, there's various reasons why we have a declining canopy, climate change, and people, want to remove trees on the property. On town properties, we do try to look to make sure we don't remove canopy unless there's a public safety concern, the tree is dead. We have a lot of our trees that are being choked by invasive species. So they're really, on a lot of our properties in the right-of-way, we need to do some invasive species management. A lot of people call DPW asking for advice on their property or even what we do on municipal lots. Do we have a policy or written policy or guidelines? We do not. We've looked at different we've talked about it at tree committee. We've looked at different methods, but really what we need to do is do an inventory plan, and the town of Westford recently did one, so we did look at that as a model. So proposing $75,000. With that $75,000, we would be able to do probably 20 plus miles of roadway to have the inventory and recommendations. And then also I'd like to target some properties, potentially, this is Warren Pole pictured, could be Coolest Farm. And with that, try to have some type of outline to give guidance to the community and to DPW on how to manage invasive species, because it is part of how we protect the canopy.
Okay, any questions on Article 12? Take a motion.
I'll make a motion to recommend Article 12 to fall town meeting as presented.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous, thank you.
Article 13 is $50,000 from the Golf Course Enterprise Fund retained earnings to extend the property line netting and poles located on the first hole at the Chelmsford Country Club.
So this is pictured here is the first hole at the country club, and just on the right side of this picture, there's a house. Can't see it, it's right past those trees on Park Place. And the country club, they had received some emails that balls were going over this fence and hitting their house. And there are other incidents or case law in the state where we have to. That is, I guess, we're trespassing. Actually, Manager Cohen and I were on site to meet with the Sterling Management, the company, and first person at the hole happens to hit it, and it goes over the netting. So we have witnessed it, and so really the proposal. We looked at various opportunities. Could you realign the tee? Could you do some pruning of the trees on the left? Really, what we need to do is extend the netting. So the netting, as you see here, you'd be putting poles onto the existing poles and extending the netting up about 25 feet. And that's in the amount of, and there is an estimate, so $50,000 is the estimated cost.
So it's how high now?
I have to check how high it is now. Basically, it's just below the tree canopy. So it would go about, it's probably 10 feet above the current tree canopy, so it would go another 25 feet. I think those poles probably are 25, probably 35 feet, I'd say.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions on Article 13? Okay, we'll have a motion.
I'll make a motion to recommend Article 13 to fall town meeting as presented.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous, thank you. Article 14.
Article 14 is a request regarding the Southborough School partial roof replacement schematic design. We're seeking $100,000 from free cash to fund this project. This one, again, we've worked on with the superintendent of schools, Public Works, myself, and our facilities managers. And this would replace basically 3/4 of the roof that's 26 years old. And the solar panels that were installed 10 years ago would have to be removed and reset. Even though this is, again, an MSBA project that will fund at least 50% of the project, and even though it's called accelerated repair, it really cannot happen until the summer of 2026. So if it's approved now, we'll do the design work and then bid it, because you obviously want to be doing this project when the kids are in school, and the state doesn't have the funding or the schedule to do it sooner than that. So Christina, anything to add on this?
Sure. This is just a picture. We do an annual update of all of our roof inventory assessment of all of the roofs in all town school buildings. And so this was flagged as a roof that needed replacement through that report. So we do have solar panels on these roofs. So that will be part of the project to remove and reset. We currently estimate, this is based on the estimate provided in the report, but part of this study will validate that estimate or verify it. We're currently estimating about $1.2 million. And I guess the panels have about 10 years remaining life. So one of the analysis that we will do is potentially look at replacing them. And that could be costly, but I think it's worth just going through that analysis to see. Because it'd be great to put new panels on a new roof, but also we want to look at that analysis during the study.
And one of the reasons, we may receive word from the MSBA that we've been formally accepted. They've been out and done a site visit. They've given us all the indications. And the reason that we're doing this now is when they do send that letter that says you're in, you have 120 days to appropriate the funds for the project. Well, we don't want to be calling a special town meeting in February, for this purpose. So again, the expectation is that we're going to be in. If we're not in, then, we can always go back at a future town meeting and rescind the project. But basically, that's why we're doing it now, even though the construction won't take place till summer of '26.
Okay, any other questions?
So in the 1.2 million, Christine, that is reusing the existing solar panels.
Yes, that's remove and reset. It's hard to find what that exact dollar figure is. I had estimated $200,000 to $300,000, but it's really off of rough numbers. So that would be part of this assessment to validate that cost.
And I'm glad to hear that you're going to look at possibly replacing them. I was having a discussion with somebody recently that's in that field. And they suggested to me that even since 2014, in the past 10 years, there's been an acceleration of technology, so to speak, such that today's panels are that much more efficient and proficient. So thank you for looking at that.
Well, there's also like a significant cost to just removing them as part of the roof cost. So if you're going to remove them, and you might as well replace them
And
at
I
the same
agree,
time.
if
It
the
kind of
new
makes
on
sense.
new is the
Yeah.
way to go.
New
so
and
you
new
don't-
is the best, but so we'll do that full analysis, the life cycle cost. And it might be a little extra, but it's a little extra, it probably is worth it. Because in 10 years, you'd be replacing it on a relatively new roof and
damaging.
and potentially damaging it.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Take a motion?
I'll make a motion to recommend Article 14 to fall town meeting as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, unanimous.
And then Article 15 is to transfer the balance of the free cash, which is $560,000, into the general stabilization fund. As we mentioned earlier, our balance right now is $15.338 million. It's roughly 9.4% of our budget. And again, if we put this funding in, we'll be closer to 10%, but not above our policy of free cash.
Okay, any questions about Article 15?
I'll make a motion to recommend Article 15 to fall town meeting as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
That's unanimous, thank you. All right, then we go over
We
to
did
17.
Oh, Article 17 is a community preservation rescission of a fund that was voted back in 2019, 5 years ago, for a facade program. It was $100,000. The program got delayed by COVID, and then even once we've got past COVID now, there hasn't been any interest in utilizing this fund. So the Community Preservation Committee is requesting that town meeting rescind this appropriation, which would then put it back into its undesignated fund balance.
Any questions about Article 17?
I'll make a motion to recommend Article 17 to fall town meeting as presented.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Then we skip over to 19.
Article 19 is a request from the Chelmsford Water District for an easement at the Parker School, the high school, and the McCarthy School. And basically, the reason for this easement request is it all has to do with the treatment system and PFAS and everything else. And in order to do this, they really need to get the water from the Smith Street wells over to Crooked Spring Road to the treatment plant. And so if this is not granted, it's going to cost them a whole lot more money to go around as opposed to easements through the school projects. So again, because this is school committee property, this plan has been presented to the school committee. They are to make their vote of approval prior to town meeting because, we can't transfer without their approval, consent, but everything I understand to date is the school committee has no concerns and they're scheduled to bless this at their meeting before the town meeting.
Okay, any questions on Article 19?
I'll make a motion to recommend Article 19 to fall town meeting as presented.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
That's unanimous.
Article 20 is a request to transfer parcels to the Conservation Commission. Most of them are tax title parcels, with the exception of the Warren Pole property, which was recently acquired. So again, you're familiar with Warren Pole. The preservation restriction is now in the hands of our town council and then will be submitted to the state for approval. The other ones are properties that the town, through the finance director, treasurer, collector, has acquired over the years by tax possession. For example, this one by the country club. So there's the country club main parcel. These two parcels right here, you can see by the green, or hopefully you can see by the green, they're all wet. One's 0.23 acres, was acquired back in 2003, this one right here. And again, it has a nominal assessed value of 22.9. And the one below, which is 3.95 acres, has an assessed value of $23,700. That was acquired back in '95 with the purchase of the golf course, but it's completely wet. The next one is over here off of Beaver Brook, and you can see the development. This is Hunt Road. This is the property there. The mobile home park. But basically, you have these two parcels. The first one, the 405-2, was acquired in 2010. It's 3.48 acres, and then the one adjacent to it is 1.15 acres acquired at the same time. Again, these tend to be basically orphan parcels from subdivision development that aren't developable, and then what happens is they stop paying the taxes on it, and then the collector takes it for non-payment of taxes. So basically, it has no developable or value to the community, and so we throw it into conservation for protection. And then the last one is this one here, off of here's 495. Here's Coulis over here. There's also the coolest parcel over here. This is a 0.22 acres acquired back in 2011 from Spiro Brujas, of those the egg farm. So this property, again, was orphaned because it has no developable value. And so again, it's just easier and simpler, just convey it to the Conservation Commission for its wet purpose, and it adds to their inventory of conservation lands. But obviously, nothing is going to change or happen with it, and it's of no value for private sale either. So those are the parcels.
Any questions on Article 20?
I'll make a motion to recommend Article 20 to fall town meeting as presented.
Second?
I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. It's unanimous. And Article 21.
Article 21, you're very familiar with as of earlier this evening. This is Parkhurst Road street acceptance. I don't think we need to go through this again, but basically it's trying to put it on our inventory, and again, there's no takings or any other adverse impacts from this actual street acceptance procedure.
Okay, any questions about Parkhurst Road? Take a motion.
I'll make a motion to recommend Article 21 to fall town meeting as presented.
Second?
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, very good. Thank you. All right, on to town manager reports.
Thank you. Just briefly, let's get to it. Okay. First item under my report is to publicly and formally notify the select board that, speaking of town meeting, the zoning article that was adopted at the spring annual town meeting pertains to the MBTA Communities Zoning Overlay District bylaw amendment, was approved by the Attorney General's office on August 5th. As you can see, per the notice to the town clerk, and notice was posted by the clerk, and I did notify the board by email that day. I apologize for not formally presenting it to the board at a meeting in the last month, but that has been approved. More importantly, where we're going now is we are working with town council to modify the development agreement so that we can submit for our MBTA's communities compliance by the December 31st deadline, and that's moving now. My words to the community development director were, let's not wait till the last minute. Let's get this in, so that way if any issues were to arise, we have time to respond to them. But right now, that document has been reviewed by council, and I believe it's being sent to Trammell Crow, and then we'll come back to you, the select board, because you're the holder of the restriction.
Paul,
Yes.
There's other places in this letter from the state that talk about the town should consult with town council about future amendments.
Yep.
Are we, like, I haven't seen this on the planning board
It's-
agenda at all, is that?
It's been shared with the planning board. I don't know what their intent is or what their plans are, but when this came in, this was sent to the planning board as well. But I don't have an update in terms of what their plans are. And council has this as well, but I don't know what their intention is at this point in time. Maybe it will come at Springtown meeting, but I don't know.
Okay, I mean, it may be worth just, maybe Evan or somebody reminding them that this is here.
Okay, next on my report is, I'm going to report on the electricity supply contract for to the town's facilities, meaning the town buildings. As the board may recall, the town's electricity procurement is separate from our municipal aggregation plan for residents and small businesses. Our 3-year contract expires this December 10th. Since the spring, Christopher Haley, who's the sustainability director, and I have been monitoring the energy market with our consultant. And the good news is it looks like the best conditions sort of are here, but we're also out of time. And meaning we have to, in order to have an effective transfer of the contract and so forth. So a week ago, we moved forward with a 4-year electricity supply contract with Constellation New Energy. And in keeping with the town's policies, this is 100% green renewable electricity supply. You remember we had those discussions with the Energy Commission, okay? And the good news is, the good news, everything being relative, the rate on this is just over 12 cents per kilowatt hour, which unfortunately is a 37% increase over our current electricity supply rate. But those rates are, we're coming out of the pandemic, and so we weren't seeing that anytime in the future. What we didn't know is if there would be an economic slowdown, and that was why we hesitated in the spring, because sometimes we've renewed the electricity contract a year ahead of time. Well, we now saw the Fed cut rates and no indication that and we're running out of time. We move forward. The good news is the 12, just over 12 cents is actually a better rate than our aggregation supply rate of 14.8 cents per kilowatt hour, or even the green residential rate of 17.8 cents. But even if you look at National Grid's current base, or the default electricity rates for this current period we're in right now, they're at 16 cents per kilowatt hour. And for the commercial customers, it's over 14.8 cents. So it's a good rate, all being with the market. And so we move forward. The other thing, as I noted at the last paragraph, is our natural gas contract expires next July. I expect we'll be back within the next several weeks with that contract. The problem with, if you've probably read it recently in the news, the problem, we have some of the highest utility costs in the country because we're at the end of the natural gas pipeline. And so that creates the spikes in the issues of summer with consumption when you have the air conditioning needs. It also creates the winter spikes when you have the cold snaps, and also the issues if you have the LNG issues, particularly with international crises and so forth. We know there's a little bit of instability in the international community right now, particularly in the Middle East, which may be why we come sooner than later. So right now, natural gas prices, we see the market for like 4 or 5 years in terms of historic how it is. Even though natural supply quantities are down compared to where they were a few months ago, the rates, and again, you're going out for 3 and 4 years, but the projections are in the market. So we'll be coming forth, I anticipate, in the short time. The reason I come forth and not do it formal hand is when you go to the market, you got to lock in within 3 hours. And we discussed this previously at the board, so we do that when we look if there's anything happening. The other thing that helped us was there wasn't any hurricanes this summer, so you didn't have the disruption, in the U.S. production in terms of the refineries and the plants and so forth. So as you can tell, we'll move on this, like I said, within a few weeks, as we're just watching for any kind of senses of volatility and so forth. But even with that, you're going to see a similar thing to the electricity prices. It's going to be a new contract, but it's obviously going to be an elevated cost just because of the market realities today.
Paul,
Yeah.
what's the difference between what you're doing here and what we voted on?
What do you mean, what we voted
Well,
on?
we voted about, on the aggregate
Right.
supply rate and gave you authority to go negotiate a contract. Is this part of that, or is
Yeah,
this?
this has been the standard practice we've had with the town, and that's why I'm here this evening, is we come for for your consent and knowledge, but the problem is I have to initial the approvals to the board, so it's basically a notification, but your consent to do it. In other words,
Right.
and that's why I'm telling you now about the natural gas is going to be the same thing. So it's all in part of the utility commodities authorization, and the board historically has allowed me to trigger with the understanding that I come back and notify the board of the market decisions.
Right, and so when the vote that we took was basically to say for the aggregate, the default is going to be the basic
Yeah,
program.
right.
And so when does that have to come up for vote again? So now you're
That will-
operating under that?
Right, and then when we go back out for aggregation again,
Okay, so
which
it's
will
the
probably be,
aggregation is the
yeah,
trigger point.
well, that'll be the
Okay.
trigger point, and it
Thank
may
you.
happen again, perhaps as early as this spring of '25, because again, that was a very short contract.
Yeah,
And I am touching base with Baudry and the Energy Committee, and I know they're going to want to revisit that once again. And that was why I did the 100% green with this contract, because we had that discussion. It was like, yeah, the town can do it, but we weren't going to place that burden on the residents. Okay. And then the last thing under my report is the double poll report from National Grid for September. Unfortunately, the printing isn't as good, but basically the column to the left on the bottom here about the open tickets, and sorry, it didn't print as well as when I see it on my computer, but September 4th, the one to the left is September 4th, and the one in the middle column is August 5th. So the status is there's still 61 open double polls, but again, as I indicated, the progress that's moving is who's holding us up. The good news is I remember last month they talked about Verizon having a bunch. That now is they've dropped from 11 to 7, and Comcast has now risen because they're the last person on that poll. So the good news is barring unforeseen weather conditions, when we get the report in a couple weeks for September, I believe you'll see that number drop down. And again, the whole point is, and what National Grid reports is, they only have 8. So that means, there's only 7 of those 8 that they feel are the balls in their court to move. One's being contested. But the bottom line is they're moving. And the whole key is to monitor the progress, not only in terms of the number of polls, but who's holding them. And right now, the good news is the biggest holder of a third of those is Comcast. So again, once they clear out, you'll see that number drop considerably. So again, I'll keep you updated as we move along on this and see where it goes. And then we obviously, as a town, right now, we only have 2 in our court, and we're working with fire and DPW to make sure that we're not holding anything up. One may have been a street light, and then another one may have been fire wire. So that concludes my report for this evening.
Okay. We have one set of meeting minutes from September 9th, and I did notice an error. Another one on somebody's name.
Corrected error.
Yeah. Christina Bruce with a K, so we changed the C to a K, but neglected to take page 3. Select Board licensing fees, Christina Bruce. So we need to do a little minor edit.
On the wrong page, Paul. It says, right there, yeah. See under Select Board licensing, Christina's misspelled.
Oh, okay.
Anything else?
So that needs to be amended?
Yes.
I'll make a motion. I'll make a motion to approve the Select Board regular meeting minutes of September 9th, 2024 as amended.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, unanimous. And just a couple notes about the releasability of executive session minutes. Minutes for release are August 5th, 2024, segment 3. Minutes not for release are July 22nd, 2024, August 5th, 2024, segments 1 and 2, and August 19th, 2024. Okay, we're to liaison reports. So, George, anything? Erin? Virginia?
Just that the Finance Committee will be hearing the remaining warrant article presentations this Thursday, and we'll be doing their recommendation votes on Thursday as well.
That's it? Okay, since we have so much time, I have a couple of things. Since our last meeting, we've had 2 ribbon cuttings. The first one, the Den on Beaver Brook in Central Square, which provides Spirit apparel. That means it's branded with Chelmsford stuff. So go buy all your Chelmsford apparel at the Den on Beaver Brook. And we also had a ribbon cutting at Skyline Nail Bar, which is on Chelmsford Street. They specialize in doing nails, but they do other stuff to make you look better too. A reminder that you probably have gotten the invitation to the NEMCOG annual meeting on October 16th, which will be at Tingsboro Old Town Hall. If you're able to go, they ask that you RSVP so they can plan accordingly, and they're scheduled to have like a little panel discussion about regionalization options and initiatives during that meeting. On Saturday, I went to an Eagle Court of Honor for Noah Peterson, our newest Eagle Scout in Chelmsford, so congratulations to Noah. And last is kind of a public service announcement. Last week I was in Lowell for a meeting that was at 7 p.m. and thinking that they stopped ticketing on the street at 6 p.m. I parked on the street, and guess what? I came out and I had a ticket on my car. And so I appealed it. Fortunately, I won my appeal, but legally, I probably should not have won it because they have changed the rule for on-street parking in Lowell. They ticket now up till 8 o'clock. So if you're going to Lowell for a late meeting, keep that in mind.
That is a good piece.
Good to know.
Yeah. So, like I said, fortunately, they did agree to waive mine since this is a fairly new initiative on their part, and it still says on the Lowell City website that if you come to Lowell after 6 p.m., you're in luck because your parking is free when it actually is really not. So there you go. All right, and so I will take another motion.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.